Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Being of Revolution. I have a World War III alert. We got a World War III alert, but before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. But we got 4 U.S. troops. They were missing, but they've been found dead. RIP to these troops. We can pray for their families. What was they doing over there? How did they die? Did they die fighting in Ukraine? Did they die fighting in the Middle East? We don't know. Let's get into this.
Army officials say a search operation is underway for 4 U.S. soldiers in Lithuania. The Army says they were conducting scheduled tactical training there.
I know they
Let's
were.
bring in ABC News senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez for more. Louis, they were there training, so what happened?
Diane, what we know is this was a scheduled training yesterday afternoon in Lithuania.
We already know the U.S. military pattern of hiding these soldiers' deaths. They could have died trying to get into Yemen. Who knows? We're hearing they drowned. We're going to try to see how does that fit into the puzzle. They drowned. They was around a watery area. We'll figure this out. But we know when these soldiers die somewhere they're not supposed to be, then we hear about the training exercises. So all over NATO, it's probably a bunch of training exercises that went wrong. A bunch of soldiers died. Why did they die?
There are about 20,000 American troops on the eastern flank of NATO, and that includes the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. And so the scheduled practice was taking place on a training ground there, and we are learning from the Lithuanian armed forces that this involved a tracked vehicle. They said that potentially a site of interest had been located that they're going to be exploring to see if they can find these soldiers and that tracked vehicle. But we spoke with a U.S. official who said that they have not located the soldiers as of now. So the search continues, and again, it highlights that the presence of these American troops who were sent there over the last 3 years in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a deterrence factor to prevent Russia from thinking about going beyond Ukraine's borders.
That doesn't make sense. He can barely get the bullshit out. You sent a handful of soldiers to go keep Russia from doing what again? It was a deterrence factor. Stop lying. Where did them soldiers die at?
And it's incidents like this that highlight that there are always dangers in any kind of a training scenario. It doesn't necessarily have to involve combat. It can just even be a training situation that is risky.
All right, Louis Martinez.
What we have is 4 U.S. soldiers found dead in a NATO country. What was they doing now? Well, they acting like they was having some war training. Well, it looked like they wasn't training, and they actually found war. Give me 1 second to line this video back up. I guess the U.S. military don't want me talking about this type of shit, huh? Oh, they trying to freeze my stop this nonsense early. All right, give me 1 second.
Serious story, ladies and gentlemen. 4 American soldiers are found dead after vanishing in Lithuania, reportedly near the border with Belarus. And man, people are worried. Look, it's a sad story either way. And I hope we get some information on how these U.S. troops died. But the scary thing is, I know, a lot of people don't want me to talk about it, but with the proximity to Belarus, there's concerns that this could be an expansion of the war in Ukraine, force Donald Trump's hand, and make everything a whole lot worse. Here's the story from the Daily Mail.
See how they go?
4 U.S. Army soldiers
killed in Ukraine fighting Russia, probably in Russia, died there. See, this is probably some of the bodies that Trump was begging Putin to hand back over. But since they don't want to tell the family they died in Russia, well, you died training to fight Russia next door to Russia. Who the hell will believe that type of BS?
Have reportedly been found dead the day after they were reported missing during a training exercise in Lithuania. The 4 servicemen who have not been identified by authorities were with the 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division. Early reports indicate that the soldiers may have been traveling in an M88 recovery vehicle, one of the largest armored vehicles used by the U.S. military, which may have fallen into a body of water. I mean, okay. The soldiers have been reported missing around 4:45 p.m. Tuesday following a training exercise near Prabade, Lithuania, sparking a widespread search conducted by the U.S. Army and Lithuanian authorities. The soldiers were reportedly carrying out a tactical training routine at the General Silvestris Zukauskis, I'm pronouncing that wrong probably, training in Prabade, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong too, which is less than 6 miles from the border with Belarus. The Lithuanian Armed Force said Wednesday they identified a possible location of the missing soldiers and their vehicle. The military said in a statement that a search and rescue operation is underway, led by the Lithuanian Armed Forces, with additional capabilities from the Fire Protection and Rescue Department and other institutions. Officials have not offered any details regarding how the soldiers or their vehicle went missing, nor the manner of their reported deaths. Okay, let's just pause. I don't want to get sensational. It's a crazy story, and who knows what happened. Maybe they drove into water and they drowned. That seems kind of crazy, but these things can happen. We've got some images. The U.S. military was performing joint training exercises with Lithuanian forces amid rising tensions between Baltic nations and Russia. This is what is alarming. Let me pull up Google Earth for you guys. And I can pull you up this. Actually, let's do this. Let's do the Ukraine battle map. That's better. The Ukrainian battle map. What's going on currently in Ukraine and Russia? Take a look at this. Here's the concern. So if you take a look at this battle map, we can move over to Lithuania, and you can see here, you've got the border with Belarus. Belarus is aligned with Russia, and Russian troops are stationed there. You can also see that not only is Lithuania bordering Belarus, they're actually bordering Russia to the west. You've got Kaliningrad, which is a Russian oblast, north of Poland and southwest of Lithuania. So you've got Russian...
Lithuania, a little pathetic, measly country. Just a little pest to Russia that the U.S. is using to stir up trouble. Lithuania couldn't beat the Russian police division. Putin could send his police division over there to handle him. This is bullshit. The 4 U.S. soldiers died doing something they didn't have no business doing.
Troops right there on the border. You've got Russian Navy moving in and out of the Baltic, and you've got Belarusian troops and Russian troops as potential conflict, I suppose. Putin had reportedly been using Belarus to stage Russian nuclear weapons as the conflict was heating up. So again, let's just put a pause real quick. Hopefully this is not an escalation of war, some kind of false flag or direct attack on U.S. troops that may get us involved in a full-scale war. Considering what's been going on, I hope not. I do want to say this. Russia's made some agreements, and I think there's some movement towards a ceasefire. So there's a Black Sea ceasefire right now, meaning that Ukraine and Russia are going to stop fighting. Again, we'll go to the battle map here. They're going to stop fighting in the Black Sea, which is good. Got to zoom out a little bit.
Him explain that to us because he don't know what the fuck he talking about. Russia didn't agree to any of that nonsense. We don't need you to break that down, fella. We just need you to let us know about the U.S. Okay. And let's look at this. So we know some U.S. troops died doing something they had no business near the Russian border. Okay, that's very, very fishy. We'll look back into that. We know they didn't die training. We know that's a lie. The war-hungry president that's in power right now, I hate that I help this genocidal maniac get in power because he's going to get us all killed sooner or later because he don't want to do what we asked him to do, and that's bring us peace. He sent more military hardware and some of our stealth bombers to the Middle East, only to threaten Iran, which they will not be threatened.
This is WW3. We either have one massive show of force going on right now or something huge is about to happen. It really seems like Trump is trying to press the issue hardcore on Iran that they have to dump their nuclear program. And now it's being reported that stealth bombers have been sent to the unsinkable aircraft carrier, which is an island located between Africa and Indonesia, about 1,000 miles south of India, called Diego Garcia. You may recall this island, this military base, being brought up many times in the past over missing flights and other mysterious things going on surrounding the base and things that the government are doing. Now, we have word that they have sent off these Northrop B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to Diego Garcia. They've also sent large transport jets, refueling planes, all in the area. And what they say is a significant buildup at Diego Garcia with at least 5 U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirits and 7 C-17A Globemasters in the area or at Diego Garcia. This is a huge buildup, and it should definitely serve as a sign to Iran that sitting on the tarmac in Diego Garcia are stealth bombers that are going to rain down hell. And they're going to. They're not there for nothing. You do not make these moves for nothing. Now, there's obviously been talk between Russia and the United States here over Ukraine. And Russia is trying to warn the United States that Tehran has a right to a peaceful nuclear program. But the United States just isn't seeing it that way. Ever since Trump struck and killed their general back in his first term, they've been hell-bent on revenge. And that's the scene on the world stage. Through all the assassination attempts, they tried to point a finger at Iran. They keep pointing the finger back to Iran. They're the last big boogeyman, so to speak, on the world stage in terms of the Middle East in their long list of places they wanted to topple. They took out Saddam in Iraq. They took out Libya. They've toppled Syria, so to speak, at this point. So Iran sitting there with an option: get rid of your nuclear capabilities in full is what Trump's saying, or you're about to get pounded out.
Yeah, right.
I see it potentially happening. And
not me.
The repercussions
I ain't say if we go, everybody go. That's what Trump want to do. It's just going to be a chain reaction.
Of all this, it's not going to be good for America, I feel. This could be the reasoning for a massive attack on America, a repercussive attack. Blowback, if you will. And this world's a stage, man. They can do anything and make you think that it was someone when it was them the whole time, turning the lights out or whatever. I'd just be head on a swivel and prepared for anything to go down here, because once these things get airborne and they start dropping these big bombs, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop until they're satisfied that they've wiped out all the nuclear stuff, potentially regime change, but I don't know if they'll go that route. We'll see. This is the latest, though.
See, more woofing, more howling at the moon. Okay, Trump, you want to? So Iran said, okay, the U.S., y'all displaying some shit to the world. We not none of them punk ass places that you bombed and terrorized. Iran saying they not Libya, they not Iraq, they not Syria. They revealed some shit too. More underground missile cities. They're gonna let all these goddamn missiles loose on all of your Middle Eastern puppets, on Israel, and on all of your bases the moment you drop one bomb. So
Iranian Revolutionary Guards have released footage showing part of their new underground ballistic missile base amid heightened tensions as the U.S. under Donald Trump continues its maximum pressure campaign and threats of attack on Iranian
missile cities all on islands strategically throughout the Persian Gulf. They just letting Trump know you don't got to talk shit, bro. You keep threatening us. Just do whatever you're gonna do so we can do whatever we're gonna do. But it won't be no U.S. in the Middle East anymore if they attack Iran. So Iran just letting Trump
nuclear
know,
facilities.
No reason talking.
Iranian state television aired footage on March 25, 2025, showing a vast, previously undisclosed underground tunnel system operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps IRGC, calling it the Missile City Unveiling. It was reported that only a small portion of the base and its tunnels were made public as permitted by the military. The U.S., on the same note, has done the same by sending massive firepower to Middle East, further adding to the already heated tensions in the region. Iran has finally revealed its new underground missile facility, spanning tens of kilometers of tunnels, and housing thousands of precision-guided ballistic missiles, marking a significant show of military might. The missile city reportedly houses thousands of various advanced ballistic missiles, including Khaybar Shikan, Hajj Qasim, Ahmad, Sejal, Pava cruise missiles, and many others. It is one of Iranian 100-odd missile cities, which were previously kept a closely guarded secret. According to the Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Iranian military capability.
Iran say ain't no reason for secrets. Let's let the whole world know. The United States play stupid with us. We're gonna wipe out their military bases. Won't be no such thing as Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar. And y'all like to go vacationing in Dubai? Ain't gonna be no goddamn Dubai. They gonna get wiped out. All them little Arab flunky regimes. Iran just letting the U.S. know. Your little play toys is gonna get wiped out if you play with us the wrong way.
Capabilities have grown exponentially, claiming that the country's pace of progress far exceeds the ability of its enemies to compensate for their weaknesses. He added that enemies will remain behind in the balance of power. The disclosure came hours after U.S. intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, said that Iran is not actively pursuing nuclear weapons, and that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has not ordered the activation of a nuclear weapons program. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reiterated Tehran's commitment to diplomacy, saying that Iran is acting in its national interests and not under U.S. pressure. Tensions remain high as the U.S. continues its maximum pressure policy on Iran through economic sanctions. U.S. President Donald Trump has previously attempted to initiate talks through a letter sent to the UAE envoy. Iranian officials have stressed that negotiations will only take place under fair conditions, free from coercion or threats. Iran is too big, and its missiles are too deep underground. It is believed that any U.S. and allied assets within range of Iranian missiles in the region will be destroyed if they dare to attack Iran.
Watch what happens.
Pressing threat. Iran's nuclear program, once deemed a dire threat to global security.
U.S. President Trump's letter to Iran seeking a new nuclear deal.
is now quietly becoming one of the most powerful tools in reshaping the world's geopolitical order.
And it is time for Iran to walk away to have a nuclear weapon.
In a world where the West has long held the reins of power, Iran, a country long isolated and vilified, is positioning itself at the heart of a new multipolar world. One where Russia and China are standing shoulder to shoulder with it, challenging the status quo. This isn't just about nuclear bombs or military might. It's about global influence, independence, and a fundamental shift in how international power is distributed. As global power dynamics change, Iran's nuclear ambitions are no longer simply a security issue. They're a symbol of the new global order. But how is the US letting this slide? Let's find out. The US has long viewed Iran's nuclear program as one of the most pressing threats to global security. This concern, while not unfounded, often fails to grasp the deeper geopolitical shifts at play. Recently, the US has once again accused Iran of orchestrating military operations through the Houthis in Yemen and the Red Sea, portraying Iran as the central destabilizing force in the region. This rhetoric fits neatly into the narrative the West has maintained for decades. Iran is the enemy of global peace, and its nuclear ambitions are merely the tip of the iceberg. But as the global power landscape continues to shift, this narrow perspective is increasingly outdated. Iran, for its part, has shifted its narrative. Its nuclear program, which once sparked fear and urgency, is now viewed by Iran as a symbol of defiance. It's not just about building weapons or even about regional power. It's a direct challenge to the Western-dominated global order. While the US remains fixated on containing Iran's nuclear development through sanctions and military pressure, Iran has made it clear that it views its nuclear ambitions as an assertion of sovereignty and independence. For Iran's leadership, this is a matter of national pride and a refusal to bow to foreign-imposed constraints. And now, U.S. envoy says U.S. President Donald Trump's outreach to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, regarding a potential new nuclear deal is an effort to avoid military conflict, according U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. While the U.S. maintains its stance of maximum pressure on Iran, Witkoff emphasized that the U.S. prefers a diplomatic resolution and is prepared for dialogue, should Iran be open to it. However, Khamenei rejected the offer, calling the U.S. proposal a deception. Despite this, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi hinted at a response, signaling that negotiations could be possible under the right conditions. But let's not forget that Iran is not standing in a weak position. Iran's nuclear ambitions are part of a much larger geopolitical strategy. Over the years, Iran has used its nuclear program as a stepping stone to build a network of alliances with non-Western powers, including Russia and China. These partnerships are a direct counterbalance to U.S. influence in the region and globally. The U.S. sees Iran's nuclear program as a threat to its interests in the Middle East, but Iran views these accusations as part of a broader effort to isolate and weaken its sovereignty. In this context, nuclear development becomes not just a military issue, but a geopolitical one, an essential element in Iran's bid to challenge Western dominance. But Iran's nuclear strategy is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The U.S. continues to frame Iran's nuclear ambitions within a Cold War-like containment strategy. But Iran's response is far more sophisticated. It's a statement of intent, one that declares Iran's place in a multipolar world where it is no longer dictated to by Western powers. The real question isn't whether Iran will develop nuclear weapons. It's what the rise of Iran, with its nuclear ambitions, means for the future of global governance and the balance of power. While the U.S. fixates on Iran's nuclear program, Russia and China have adopted an entirely different approach. Rather than isolating Iran, these nations have increasingly become Iran's closest allies, recognizing that the shifting global order requires a new form of cooperation. Russia, with its history of countering Western influence, has long seen Iran as a valuable partner in the Middle East. China, with its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, views Iran as a key player in its plans to expand its economic and strategic influence throughout Asia and the Middle East. In 2025, these nations took a significant step forward in their partnership. They held joint military exercises, notably the Maritime Security Belt 2025 in the Persian Gulf. marking the fifth time in just a few years that Iran, Russia, and China had joined militarily. This was more than a show of strength. It was a sign that these countries were building a new security architecture that didn't rely on Western dominance. By engaging in military cooperation, these nations are asserting a new order where diplomacy, not military threats, drives international relations. This shift represents more than just military partnerships. It is part of a larger strategy to form alternative economic and security systems that are not dependent on Western institutions like the United Nations or NATO. Iran's inclusion in these alliances signals the emergence of a new multipolar world order, where countries that have long been excluded from Western-centric power structures are now asserting their influence on the global stage. In contrast to the West's approach of isolation and sanctions, China and Russia have embraced diplomacy as their primary tool for engaging with Iran. This was evident in March 2025, when the three countries met in Beijing to discuss the Iranian nuclear issue. The outcome of the meeting was significant. Rather than pressuring Iran into compliance with Western demands, the nations involved reaffirmed their commitment to the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), a deal meant to curb Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. What makes this development noteworthy is that it demonstrates a fundamental difference in diplomatic style. While the West continues to demand compliance through economic pressure and the threat of military action, Russia and China are pursuing engagement. They understand that the path to global stability is not through isolation, but through cooperation, dialogue, and mutual respect. For China, this is particularly significant, as it not only strengthens its relationship with Iran, but also positions itself as a leader in promoting a new, more inclusive approach to global diplomacy. Beijing's involvement in these talks also signals its growing role as a global mediator, a position the West has traditionally held. By facilitating these discussions, China is setting the stage for a future where it plays a central role in global security and diplomacy. The diplomatic success of these talks, while modest in their immediate impact, represents a broader challenge to Western-led frameworks and highlights the importance of multilateral diplomacy in the 21st century. One of the most significant developments in recent years has been Iran's admission into BRICS, the economic and political coalition. This membership marks a dramatic shift in Iran's foreign policy, signaling its growing alignment with emerging global powers that are challenging Western hegemony. For BRICS, Iran is an essential ally, especially as it seeks to challenge the dominance of the US and European powers in global economic and political systems. Iran's membership in BRICS is a testament to the shifting global landscape. By aligning itself with this coalition, Iran is asserting its role as a key player in reshaping global governance. The country is no longer just a regional actor. It is now part of a broader movement to build a multipolar world order, one where power is distributed more equally across emerging markets and non-Western countries. As a member of BRICS, Iran gains access to economic markets, investment opportunities, and diplomatic backing from countries that share its vision for a new global order. The support from Russia and China, two of the most powerful BRICS members, ensures that Iran can continue to resist Western pressures and strengthen its position in the global geopolitical landscape. At the heart of this transformation lies Iran's nuclear program, not just as a point of international contention, but as a symbol of the changing dynamics of global power. The nuclear issue has become the focal point of a larger struggle between an established Western-led order and the rise of a multipolar world where emerging powers like China, Russia, and Iran are taking the reins. Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology, while controversial, is less about weaponization and more about asserting its independence. The country's nuclear program represents its desire to break free from the constraints imposed by the West and assert its right to determine its future. It is also about sending a message. Iran will not be bullied, and it will not allow its future to be shaped by foreign powers. The West, this is a challenge to its dominance in the global system. Iran's nuclear program is not just about weapons, it's about global power dynamics and the way countries are redefining their relationships with one another. The rise of non-Western powers, exemplified by Iran's strategic alliances with Russia and China, marks the beginning of a new era in global politics, one where the old rules no longer apply. As the US continues its relentless criticism of Iran and attempts to isolate it, a far more significant transformation is quietly unfolding. one that Washington can't halt. While the West obsesses over Iran's nuclear program, a new global reality is emerging. The rise of a multipolar world where power is no longer dominated by Western nations. Iran, backed by strategic alliances with Russia and China, is positioning itself as a key player in this reshaped landscape. The West may try to apply sanctions, issue threats, and push for further isolation of Iran, but this will not stop the seismic shift underway. The BRICS coalition, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO, and increasingly influential countries like Iran are no longer willing to accept a system that is dictated by the US and its allies. The world is evolving, and the power dynamics that once favored the West are being replaced by more diverse, decentralized global leadership. The West's influence is diminishing, while nations like Iran, Russia, and China are laying the groundwork for a new order that prioritizes mutual respect, cooperation, and sovereignty. This multipolar world is already taking shape, and there's nothing the West can do to stop it. Do you think they lie when they call Iran a security threat? Why does the West want to keep all the power? Let us know in the comments section. Is it
Things are escalating pretty rapidly, pretty fast in the Red Sea with all of this aircraft carrier from United States coming in to join the campaign against the Houthis. What is happening? So we know on Monday, Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed that they had engaged in an hour-long exchange of fire with U.S. Navy forces in the Red Sea, disrupting American strikes on Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The claims could not be confirmed, but Houthi forces have exaggerated their attempted attacks in the past. Houthi forces claimed to have targeted, quote-unquote, several enemy destroyers in addition to the aircraft carrier Truman. In other words, they have claimed to have targeted Harry Truman in the Red Sea. And some other reports suggest that they have in fact attacked it and damaged it, and as a result, U.S. called it back to U.S. to guard the coast. This combat code, the second in 24 hours, lasted for several hours, during which an enemy air attack against our country was thwarted. This is what Yahya Sari, he said. If you take a listen, I want to play the video so that you can hear the original audio.
الصمود الوطني 26 من مارس، وفي إطار مواجهة التصعيد بالتصعيد، نفذت القوات الصاروخية وسلاح الجو المسير والقوات البحرية خلال الساعات الماضية عملية عسكرية مشتركة استهدفت من خلالها القطع الحربية المعادية في البحر الأحمر، وعلى رأسها حاملة الطائرات الأمريكية ترومان التي ينطلق منها العدوان على بلدنا. واستمرت المواجهة والاشتباك لعدة ساعات، بما تستمر القوات المسلحة حتى ساعة إعلان هذا البيان في التصدي الفاعل للعدوان والتعامل المسؤول مع مختلف التطورات والمستجدات ضمن منطقة العمليات، وانتصارا لمظلومية الشعب الفلسطيني في غزة، واستمرارا في إسناده ودعمه. وفي وقت سابق استهدف سلاح الجو المسير أهدافا عسكرية للعدو الإسرائيلي في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بعدد من الطائرات المسيرة، وقد حققت العملية أهدافها بنجاح بفضل الله. تؤكد القوات المسلحة اليمنية على الاستمرار في التصدي للعدوان الأمريكي ومواجهة التصعيد بالتصعيد، الاستمرار في منع الملاحة الإسرائيلية في منطقة العمليات المعلن عنها سابقا، والاستمرار في تنفيذ العمليات ضد العدو الإسرائيلي حتى وقف العدوان ورفع الحصار عن قطاع غزة.
So we will be finding out more about the updates as we hear from the media. But right now, U.S. is using all of its arsenal. They're deploying all of this work of carrier and bringing in more assets to confront the Houthis. Now, Yahya Sari also claimed that Houthi missiles forces had targeted Israel's Ben Gurion airport with another ballistic missiles, the latest in a series of attempted attacks on Israeli territory. The Truman and other assets, now listen to this important, the Truman and other assets in the Middle East have been carrying out heavy strikes on Houthi positions since March 15th. U.S. national security leader, they have told media that multiple Houthi decision makers have been killed in the airstrikes, but again, we do not have any evidence, any proof to back that up, and that the toll on the group's military capabilities had been substantial. Okay, so the toll, I mean, they are claiming success. United States and its military, CENTCOM, they are making these claims. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz told media on Sunday that Houthi had been downgraded, their capabilities and all of that. We have hit communications nodes, weapons, factories, and even some of their over-the-water drone production facilities, according to Michael Waltz. That's what he said. But again, we do not have any solid evidence, any proof to back that up. But looks like United States, they're claiming some victory. At the same time, Houthis, they're also claiming victories in some operations.
Noticed over the last couple of days. Well, we'll hear from the man himself at 8:45 towards the end of the show. I mentioned that for a reason, which I will explain later. That's what he said, you know. He said that he never had Mr. Goldberg of the virulently anti-Trump administration Atlantic magazine. He never had that number on his phone. Well, how can he have been on your Signal group? Asked the journalists, who've suddenly all sparked into investigative life now that Donald Trump is the president rather than Joe Biden. I don't know, said Mike Waltz. It must have just got sucked in. Reminds me of Groucho Marx's excuse when found with his secretary in bed. He said, who are you going to believe, me or the evidence of your own eyes? Well, the evidence of our own eyes on the Signal group of the Yemeni bomb squad is a very unattractive sight indeed. Indeed, it proves, as I was just saying with my good friend Judge Napolitano on his show earlier today, that although everything changes, everything remains the same. Meet the new boss just the same as the old boss, because the Signal group in question and the now all revealed Signal messages from luminaries like the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, are exactly the same exultant. Yo, bro, USA, we done it, guys. Exactly the same exaltation as that of Hillary Clinton on watching the video of President Gaddafi of Libya being brutally sodomized by an iron bar, tortured and then murdered on camera. We came, we saw, he died, she said, and then she laughed. Oh, how she laughed, and what demonic laughter. Nowadays, the laughter is noted by emojis, I think the young people call them. Well, the emojis were all out there, from clenched fists to US flags to people weeping with laughter, tears coming out of both eyes. That was all on view on these ugly, pornographic Signal messages that we now, I think, have seen most of. They exulted that they had successfully brought down an entire block of flats, an admission of a war crime. It is a war crime in breach of international law, in breach of the Geneva Conventions, to kill a large number of civilians in order to kill one targeted individual. And to make it even more ugly, the targeted individual wasn't even there. It always seemed slightly unlikely to me when I read in the messages that the top missile guy of Ansar Allah, they didn't even know his name. If they knew it, they certainly couldn't spell it. They
making it
wouldn't
up.
give it. The top missile guy is in the building, they said excitedly, watching it in real time. He's gone in to visit his girlfriend. It struck me as unlikely that one of the top commanders of Ansar Allah, a deeply religious fighting group, would have a girlfriend that he called upon, but you can never tell. But what we can say is that no top missile guy was killed. A girlfriend might have been. All of our neighbors certainly were. A large number of Yemenis in the poorest country in the world were massacred.
Just terrorized.
Pointlessly, for no purpose at all, by a group of the most powerful people in America, conducting it all on their telephones in real time. It's not a pretty sight. Neither is the aftermath. My comrade Pepe Escobar actually conducted an interview from the ruins just hours, maybe minutes, after the bombing raid had happened. Certainly the only English-speaking journalist so to do. That's why his report has been seen absolutely nowhere except on alternative media, because he demonstrated without any fear of contradiction that the building was a residential tower block and that it was destroyed by J.D. Vance, by Pete Hegseth, and by Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz, and all the other creeps, freaks that were on that signal group. A large number of people were killed. Who cares how many? Who cares about their names? Who cares how many women, how many children were involved? Certainly nobody on the signal group give a damn about it. But as His Honor, Judge Napolitano asked me today, did I think that America was safer as a result of this act of mass murder conducted by signal on telephones?
Revolution is a way of life.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. At the very least, any surviving husband, any surviving eldest son, any surviving son at all, maybe daughter at all, of the people mercilessly murdered for nothing by top American officials will be determined to get their revenge. Now, luckily, perhaps for you, most of them will never get as far as doing so. But some of them, maybe even just one of them, might be able to avenge his dead father, his dead mother, his dead siblings. Is America safer as a result of the joking and joshing and murdering on that signal group? Well, if you believe that, I've got a bridge here in London I could sell you going cheap. In truth, the world has gotten more and more and more dangerous, and it has made no difference at all that it's no longer Joe Biden's auto pen that is signing the executive orders for murder. It is Donald Trump, the peace candidate. It is Tulsi Gabbard, who opposed the Biden administration's bombing attacks on Yemen, only to exult in her own bombing attacks on Yemen.
Hypocrite.
On signal this week. It is Donald Trump, the peace candidate, who is responsible for the renewed genocidal onslaught thousands of miles away on the Mediterranean in the Gaza Strip, where in the last week, well over 1,000 people have been murdered in cold blood in their tents. Yes, in their tents. What was it they used to say about the $10,000 missile destroying someone in a $20 tent? Well, they're much more than $20,000, but the tents are just as cheap as they ever were and just as easy to murder a child within. They set a record in the last week. And don't believe me, this is straight from Haaretz, the newspaper of record in Israel. This is the Israeli press speaking. Israel set a child-killing record yesterday, said the editorial column of Haaretz. It killed 300 children in 51 minutes.
That's disgusting.
Just think about that. Not since the charnel houses, the slaughterhouses of Birkenau, of Belsen, of Auschwitz, have 300 children been murdered in 51 minutes. In Auschwitz, there were Jewish children, almost certainly by the later part of the war. In Gaza, the executioners call themselves the Jewish state. They say they're acting on behalf of all Jews. They say they are the state of the Jews. Even though hundreds of thousands of Jews all over the world, including inside Israel, say, not in my name. You are not murdering these children in my name. Some of the bravest people on the planet are now being kicked out of American universities to the cheers of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's supposed to be looking after America's health, but is instead academically executing students, including Jewish students at Columbia University, who've been protesting against this genocide. In fact, in a truly bizarre statement earlier today, Kennedy said, we need an investigation into the declining number of Jews attending Columbia University. Do you want to know the percentage of Jewish students at Columbia University? It's 23.5%. Jews are 2% of America. At the University of Columbia, they're more than 23%, and that's up on previous years when it was 21 and 22%. But how many, what percentage, Mr. Kennedy, must there be of Jewish students at Columbia University before it will satisfy you? 50%? 75%? And what about those Jewish students who are protesting against your maniacally beloved Israel? Are they not the right kind of Jews? You're going to kick them out because they don't fit your narrative. America has gone mad. And when Judge Napolitano asked me today, why are we doing all this for a single tiny country of 7 million people, most of them immigrants from Europe and North America? Why are we doing all this? Bending our entire shape of our society, disfiguring the face of our society. Why are we doing it? Answer came there none for me, for I have no answer to that. And the dogs of war are out in the media. The narrative has reached fever pitch. The B-52s, 7 of them, have arrived in Diego Garcia, where they're parked on the runway within bombing distance, including nuclear bombing distance, of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Incidentally, the Americans have just opened a new base with nuclear-capable range of China in the Philippines. China's very angry about it. China may even be prepared to do something about it. But ask yourself this: what would the United States do if China opened a military base in a country within bombing range of the United States and began to move nuclear-capable bombers and weapon systems onto it? But the vultures are circling around Iran. Iran plainly believes it is about to be attacked. There are some, Scott Ritter amongst them, he's our guest later, we'll be asking him why, believe that Iran should capitulate. But from what I can see, capitulation is the last thing on Iran's mind. For two reasons. First of all, they regard it as beneath their national and Islamic dignity to capitulate to Donald Trump, the murderer of their great national hero, General Haj Soleimani, but mainly because they believe that having capitulated on their nuclear program, to which they have every legal entitlement under all treaties signed by them and in existence in the world, the demands will not stop coming, that a blackmailer never stops with the first payment and always comes back for more. As Professor Said Mohammed Marandi put it earlier today in reply to Scott, to capitulate on this would be to live forever before the blackmailer's sword, and that we will not do. And for what it's worth, though none of us can be sure one way or the other, I believe that Iran will not capitulate, and that therefore a state of war will exist between the United States and, whether they admit it or not, their allies and Iran.
All for Israel.
The United States will be flying through the air of its satrapies and principalities in the Persian Gulf. It will be using the water of the principalities of the Persian Gulf. It will be, in many cases, certainly in the case of Qatar, using the military bases that the United States has there in order to launch what Scott believes may be a dirty bomb nuclear attack against Iran. If that happens, all bets are off, all calculations null and void. I have adumbrated many times before exactly what I believe Iran will do in response, up to and including the total destruction of Israel by ballistic missile attack, armed with who knows what munitions, that the oil and gas installations and infrastructure of all of America's allies in the Persian Gulf will lie in ruins, a flaming ruin within 60 minutes of an American attack, and the Straits of Hormuz will be effectively permanently closed to oil and other traffic going through the narrow straits, entirely controlled by the Islamic Republic of Iran. You don't have to be an economist to work out what the impact of that will be. We're talking petrol at $500 a gallon, if you can get it. We're talking factory closures. We're talking economic wreckage across the Western world. We're talking not recession, but depression. All for what? All for Israel. Because that's the only conceivable reason why Donald Trump could have launched the maniacal bomb attack on civilian targets in Yemen, and it's the only conceivable reason why he would do so against Iran. certainly it's not putting America first. It's putting America last. We'll hear first off from the one and only Max Blumenthal right after this.
Blood work done after he started this creatine, and his creatine level.
Fighter Oksanka with a prosthetic leg and a Ukrainian flag on her chest. So little kids can now dream of growing up and dying in NATO's proxy war, or just have a leg blown off in battle. That's for the future of Ukraine. This comes as a new report out this morning shows the size and scope of Ukraine's cemeteries has more than doubled in recent months. Just look at these images. Just take a step back when you think about the warmongers in Washington, D.C., and NATO and the European Union who want more of these people to die. Look, all of the extra space that they've made available. Look at that right there on your screen, the left side of your screen. That's for the many thousands of people that will continue to die unless this ends soon. It's an absolute disaster. The Time magazine just published a brand new interview with Ukrainian dictator Zelensky, and it's pretty damn revealing.
First I'll go through this part because this is the part that made me absolutely nuts. They say, well, he doesn't really like all the gold decor in the nation's capital, but he has one room where he goes to chill out and relax, and it has paintings that he picked himself. Take a look at them. They feature the Kremlin on fire, a Russian battleship sinking, and his people at war inside the Russian borders. And he says this Kremlin on fire one is his favorite. That's not normal. This is not a guy who cares about life, you guys. This is a guy who cares about death.
So let's bring in Colonel Douglas McGregor now to talk about all of these revelations in this Time magazine article about him basically admitting now that, you know what, Ukraine is done. The only way we survive is if the West steps up. He hopes that Europe will be the ones to step up and really fund and supply weapons to continue this senseless war. Colonel, good to see you. Welcome back to the show. Just first, your thoughts on this Time magazine interview with Zelensky.
Well, my thoughts about most interviews with Zelensky are not very positive. The man is a pathological liar. And so it's difficult to accept much of what he says, though I admit you're correct. He's finally talking about the losses and the destruction of his country, which, in my judgment, is largely his fault. Now, you will recall, because you were one of the few people that was interviewing me some time ago when this war got off to a start, and I started reporting the tremendous losses the Ukrainians were taking. And everybody said, oh, no, that's a lie. He's working for Putin or something. And then they were attributing these losses the Ukrainians were taking to the Russians. Well, now at least we have the true picture, and you're showing it, and it needs to be shown to people, because this has been a terrible, terrible disaster for Ukraine. Russia, of course, has suffered. It's paid a price. It's lost 100,000 Russians, probably 10,000 Chechens on top of that. But those losses are almost minuscule when you figure that somewhere is between 1.2 million and 1.5 million Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. And this man, Zelensky, is the principal obstacle to peace. I mean, the man that obviously conducted this interview isn't aware of it. But the discussions that are going on between us and the Russians in Riyadh are going very well. And we're getting down into details. We're going to iron things out. The only thing that stands between the normalization of relations with Moscow and disaster right now is, of course, Zelensky. He wants disaster. We want normalization. So I plead with the president, whenever he's listening, exercise your power and authority, remove Zelensky, get rid of this man. This man is a danger to all of us. And as soon as he's out of the picture, all the things that the president wants to see happen, an ending to the killing, a ceasefire, agreements, all of those things will happen. But you've got to get Zelensky out of the picture.
Right. And so one of the things that kills me about this article is that the author says, well, I met him last year in Switzerland when he was pitching his peace plan. And this quote, some of its demands struck his allies as fanciful, and no one expected Ukraine to achieve all of these goals, certainly not anytime soon. Well, that's nice of them to admit a year later after people have already died. So I wanted to throw my computer the fact that the mainstream media is now admitting that this has always been Zelensky's ego project to the death of thousands. Oh, but we knew that all along. No, they didn't. How can they say that? They've been lying to us.
Well, I think you're hitting the key point, and that is, yes, they were lying to us because truthfully, behind the scenes, I'm sure they knew the truth and they were told to lie, and they readily lied. This was the whole narrative problem that Clayton has talked to many of his guests about. You can go back to Mike Krupa and talk about this sort of thing. The truth was out there, but no one wanted the truth. And so the lie took over and everybody accepted it. The media accepted it, not just here, but all across Europe. Now suddenly they say, well, we knew these were fanciful aspirations. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead as a result of fanciful aspirations. And of course, the main culprits are, of course, Biden and his administration, but also the people in London and Paris and Berlin and the other major capitals that maintained the fiction. And anybody who challenged it was a traitor, was somehow or another selling out his country. It's crazy.
Or just a betrayal to this myth that was Zelensky. This line also made me crazy that they need to make sure that there is some kind of peace agreement that Zelensky will not find too humiliating. Who the hell cares how he feels? So people have to die so he's not humiliated? What the hell kind of journalism?
Kid gloves. Yeah.
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 Sorry, I'm ranty,
ridiculous.
but I'm pissed.
No, Natalie, you're 100% right. And that's why this man needs to go away. And the president of the United States, who's presided over this disaster in the past, is being replaced. We have a new one. His name is Trump. He did not create this. This is not his responsibility. But he needs to act decisively to get out of this. And that means get rid of Zelensky and the gang of criminals that surround him. If he doesn't do it, very shortly, he's going to own this disaster. You know how Americans are. They only have so much patience.
Yeah.
He promised an end to this disaster. He's got to end it. To end it, you got to get rid of Zelensky.
Well, as an Eagles fan and a Philadelphia sports fan, I know it. We have a very thin amount of patience, and as soon as you screw up, as soon as you start underperforming, you're going to start hearing boos. And so yeah, you're right about that. I want to get your take on this, Colonel. So, a friend of the show, Eva Bartlett, one of the greatest journalists really in the world. She really shone a light on the pedal mines that were being used by Ukraine to attack and kill civilians. They were like these green little like leaf-like pedal mines that would wind up in children's parks where they'd pick them up and they'd have their hands blown off or killed. Hundreds of people killed, civilians targeting this. Well, now here's their new strategy, these new grass mines, which are now meant to look like sort of chunks of grass so that children can pick these up and they'll blow up. So they don't look like pedal mines anymore, but these are the new types of mines that Ukraine is launching into civilian areas in the People's Republic of Donetsk. So while these peace talks are going on in Riyadh, they're rolling out new strategies to target and kill civilians. Are you surprised?
No, because we tolerate it. Remember, we outlawed after Desert Storm the use of these IPCM munitions. These were little bomblets that looked like baseballs. And children in Iraq would find these on the ground, picked up the ball and throw it. The next thing you knew, it exploded and either killed the child or maimed the child for life. And so we went back and said, no, we're not going to produce these anymore. We're going to outlaw these. And then we discovered we had some of these remaining in the arsenal that had not been destroyed yet. And we shipped them to Ukraine. The Ukrainian leadership, this criminal government, is full of hatred. It hates in the plural, which is the worst kind of hatred. It's bad enough when one person hates another, but hating in the plural leads to disasters like the Holocaust during World War II and innumerable other places, Cambodia and so forth. This has got to stop. Zelensky is responsible. He's pushing this. His supporters in Washington are pushing this because it's all about hatred. That's another reason why President Trump's got to get involved and say, that's it. We're finished. They're out. We will do no more business with this regime. They must go.
I want to ask you, we both want to ask you about this signal leak before we let you get out of here. And also the Diego Garcia news over the past couple of hours. You probably have a lot more awareness about this, which is normally America has its B-2 bombers in America. Well, suddenly over the past couple of days, there's been a huge influx of American bombers appearing in the atoll, the island of Diego Garcia, showing force to Iran, preparing for strikes against Iran. This comes on the heels of this signal leak, of course, that we saw with the attacks on the Houthi rebels in Yemen. So first on Diego Garcia and these bombers, what is your thought here? What are we positioning to do?
Well, first of all, nobody should know about this. And unfortunately, today in the world of satellite surveillance, it's very difficult to hide forces on the surface that move around, whether they're surface ships or aircraft or troops. But I am disappointed that this sort of thing is peddled by the media. If I were the Secretary of Defense, I would be furious. You know, this sort of thing should not be common knowledge. Now, what are they going to do? I think it's pretty clear, Clayton. This is all about Iran. You don't need to employ B-2 bombers to strike the Houthis in Yemen, for God's sakes. So this is very, very sophisticated aircraft designed to survive integrated air defenses at 35, 40,000 feet and bomb with precision. There's only one target set out there for which these would be useful to the United States at this point, and that is obviously Iran. Now, you know, I don't support this idea. I think this is a catastrophe.
They do it.
I don't think we should bomb anybody over this business right now. But unfortunately, we're not in charge. And this administration has played its cards and said, you know, we're the Israel First administration and we're going after Iran. So I think it's pretty obvious. Now, is this just a threat? Well, I don't think it's just a threat. I don't think it's a meaningless gesture. You don't move this kind of equipment. And this is the tip of the proverbial iceberg. This is what you see. Beyond that, there's a lot more firepower now that's being assembled in the region.
Now, we learned from this signal leak that it would seem that the person who was flying the aircraft was not the same person that was actually deploying the weapons, and that there was authorization to strike a civilian apartment because one of the targets was in it. That's usually not allowed, right? And so you're talking about war crimes in Ukraine, and then we are watching it play out in front of us. There were civilian deaths. Am I reading this correctly?
Natalie, I thought the clown show was over.
Yeah.
You know, when the election occurred and we got a new set of people, this is a clown show. First of all, these kinds of conversations are deplorable in any case for the reasons that you cite. The sort of cavalier attitude towards the loss of human life and celebrating the death of an individual that for some reason we decided we wanted to personally annihilate, which, as you point out, strictly speaking, we have laws against assassination, particularly of people in other governments. But having said all of that, putting this out on Signal is incomprehensible. We have encrypted networks. There's no reason that any discussion impinging on national security involving secrets, and some of this could be construed as, well, it's not strictly speaking classified. Well, hell, you've just revealed tremendous intentions. You've revealed what you are about, who is making these decisions. You're talking about the fact that Americans really don't know anything about the Houthis, so they don't understand why it's necessary for us to annihilate them from high altitude. These kinds of conversations are frightening, and they're amateurish and they're unprofessional. So I don't know what the president is going to do about any of it, if anything. But under the circumstances, I think someone should pay the price, whoever set this up. And I don't know how this man Goldberg, who is a card-carrying enemy of Donald Trump and the administration in general, would have ever been included in something like this. I haven't figured that out. If this is a hack, do we know that? If it's not a hack, who put the name on there? And why did that name show up there? The whole thing is incomprehensible. It makes this look clownish in the eyes of the whole world.
Right. Yeah. And, Pete Hegseth can kind of downplay it and kind of spin it and say there's nothing classified in here and go back to peddling nonsense and propaganda, and that's fine. But at the heart of it, there's something really fishy with this and how this all unfolded. It's really fishy in that it happened.
Senior levels, Clayton, when you get to senior levels like this, you're dealing with 4 stars and secretaries of defense and vice presidents and national security advisors. And I've been on the periphery of some of these things. And I watched as a particular general officer was told to speak to the Secretary of Defense. And in came the man with the satellite phone and the encryption device and connected back to the Secretary of Defense in Washington. And then the Secretary of Defense came up on the net to talk to the general officer. All of that was encrypted. All of it was secure. And the conversation they had, in comparison with what we've heard about, Clayton, was modest. In other words, This is back in the mid-90s, and people would take no chances, none, that this kind of thing could ever go public.
It's not just goonery. It's wrong.
Yeah.
It's flat out wrong to, you're right, assassinate and have acceptable civilian targets. This is one of the things that turned most of us against Obama. So come on, guys.
You got to remember something else, that you're talking about a generation of people who are in charge right now. I exclude President Trump from that because he's not part of this generation. But if you look at the ages of these people, they don't have any real military experience. I'm sorry, but showing up for a few months in the National Guard and going on patrol, or being in the public affairs office of the Marine Corps, these things do not prepare you to understand the gravity of the situation you're discussing. You're talking about the destruction, not just of property, but of human beings on a grand scale with weapons of mass destruction. And people say, well, that's not true. Well, I got news for you. A 2,000-pound bomb that is precision delivered is a weapon of mass destruction that will kill and annihilate everything. You start talking about these things and you don't have an appreciation for what's at stake, because there are consequences to our action. They're not limited to Yemen. They're not limited to Iran. These consequences can reach beyond the region. And this is the problem and the danger of a regional war. I don't think we understand, frankly, the consequences involved. I don't think we understand the implications. It frightens me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frightens all of us. Colonel Douglas McGregor, always great to see you. Thank you for your insights, as always, and being clear-headed in this, right from the very beginning. Okay. Thanks, Colonel.
Good to see you.
Boston Marathon bombers, if they'd had a signal channel, it's the kind of ugly war pornography that we might have seen on their messages. It repulsed me, especially when I see the people who were involved, who were supposed to be the alternative to the mass murderers that came before. How did it strike you?
Well, Signalgate, as it's now known, is become the first major scandal of the second term of Donald Trump. But it's not a scandal for the reason which it should be. In official Washington, Signalgate is a scandal over OPSEC, or operational security. It's a scandal over a bumbling cast of characters who denounce DEI, but also support, in the form of Pete Hegseth, DUI. And it's sort of funny. It's like a Marx Brothers sketch. But that's not the scandal here. The scandal is the content of the texts. And the content tells us that they are willfully, deliberately bombing civilian buildings in order to get to assassinate people they don't even know. One referred to by National Security Council Director Mike Waltz as the Houthis' top missile guy who is visiting his girlfriend. There are now scores and scores of civilians dead across Sana'a. We don't even know what the military result is. And this is a war being waged on behalf of Israel to protect Israel's genocidal imperatives in Gaza, to prevent the one force on the planet, Ansar Allah, from being able to pressure Israel into a ceasefire and allowing food and electricity into Gaza as it agreed to. And it's a war being waged on one of the poorest countries on the planet by a gargantuan empire with British assistance. That's the scandal. But in Washington, there's no problem with the war at all for the Democrats or any of Trump's critics. They're just making it a scandal over OPSEC and goofy characters. And it's something that the public is increasingly disinterested in and won't actually harm Trump in the long run. And then there's another issue here, which relates to your monologue about Iran directly. Mike Waltz, the National Security Council Director, is a longtime project of the Israel lobby. He sits firmly in the neoconservative camp, is very fervently pro-Iran war. How did he have Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number? How did Jeffrey Goldberg get let in to this Signal chat? And who is Jeffrey Goldberg? The answer appears to be that Mike Waltz, 2 days before letting Goldberg accidentally into this chat, was seeking to leak to him on behalf of the neocon faction in the Trump administration to try to move the message, which is not just we need to bomb Yemen because the Houthis are terrorists, but we also need to attack Iranian nuclear sites. That's my theory based on solid fact, the solid fact that it was Mike Waltz who reached out to Jeffrey Goldberg. So who's Jeffrey Goldberg? Jeffrey Goldberg is the leading pro-Israel journalist in probably American history. As a young man, he volunteered to serve in the Israeli military as a guard at the concentration camp in the Negev known as Ketziot. He emerged in U.S. media as not just sort of a liberal pro-Israel Zionist, but also as a neocon who was furnishing pro-war propaganda for the Bush administration about Saddam Hussein being tied to Osama bin Laden. Dick Cheney cited it twice during the run-up to the Iraq War. Then he was Benjamin Netanyahu's errand boy during the Obama administration, attempting to convince Obama and America that Israel was going to imminently attack Iran unless the U.S. did it first. This is Netanyahu's agenda, and Goldberg was lying. Now, Goldberg has subsequently told many lies about Donald Trump or published unsourced stories that generated a massive media buzz about Trump calling World War I soldiers losers. He's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, probably the worst magazine in America, which is virulently Zionist and anti-Trump. And here's Mike Waltz reaching out to this figure and compromising the security of everyone in the Trump administration. But no one in Washington now is asking why Mike Waltz wanted Jeffrey Goldberg's ear, why he was grooming Jeffrey Goldberg. And it all seems to be about the neocon faction in the Trump administration pushing for war with Iran.
None of this is in America's interests, of course. This is the very opposite of putting America first. This is all being done for Israel. I'm not able to answer the question. Even my own children ask me it. And I have no answer. Why? Why, Max? Why are they doing all this? Why are they bending themselves out of the shape that they at least would like to be seen in? Why do they all, your country and mine, compromise, debase all of the things they say they stand for a tiny little, I'll say it like a French president once did, a shitty little state on the Mediterranean of 7 million people? What is it that's so irresistible about this settler state that we have to do anything and everything to help them?
Well, I should annotate that and say a shitty little genocidal apartheid state 7,000 miles away from where I sit right now is basically occupying this government. And it's all about the Benjamins. We know that. Miriam Adelson, the widow of the late casino baron Sheldon Adelson, is the top donor to Donald Trump, has contributed something like 600 million or more to Donald Trump's elections and various political campaigns. She represents one thing and one thing only: Netanyahu's Israel, the Likud party in Israel. She is an Israeli asset, and she was granted a better seat at Trump's inauguration, directly behind Donald Trump, than every member of Congress who is there and most secretaries in Donald Trump's incoming cabinet. And she is paying for this. The Jerusalem Post recently called Miriam Adelson a modern-day Rothschild who is essentially setting the agenda for Donald Trump. So whether it's kidnapping green card holders, permanent legal residents of the United States off the street on camera with masked Gestapo squads of secret police because they attended one or two anti-Israel Palestine solidarity demos, or bombing Yemen, this is about the U.S. government acting as Israel's agent. Adam Boehler, who was Trump's hostage negotiator trying to get U.S.-Israeli dual nationals out of Gaza, when he declared that we are not Israel's agent in an interview on CNN, he was immediately sidelined. He lost his job because we are Israel's agent. And it doesn't just relate. It's something that I should say, growing up in Washington, being in Washington, I can tell you and all your viewers that in private, people in power in Washington do not love Israel. They don't have this deep, abiding affection for Israel. In fact, they kind of despise Israel. And you can see that in the Signal chat where J.D. Vance says, why are we waging this war when only 3% of U.S. shipping goes through the Red Sea? It's mostly European shipping. He wouldn't say Israel. But another person in the chat who's not very well known, Joe Kent, who is sort of a foreign policy restrainer like J.D. Vance maybe was, working directly under Tulsi Gabbard, said, if we don't attack now, Israel will start to attack Yemen and we will be forced to constantly resupply Israel. Kent is basically saying we don't have any choice. We just have to resupply Israel and back up whatever it does, even though we might not want to. So you can see right there, the vice president and a key intelligence official are acknowledging that this war is not serving the American interest. And I know for a fact that those two figures, and J.D. Vance in particular, strongly oppose a war with Iran and will be able to do nothing to stop the momentum towards that war if Miriam Adelson tells Donald Trump that that is what he has to do to maintain her fortune.
Honestly, it's like episode 4 of The Godfather. It is almost impossible to believe that it's fact and not fiction. But let's move on to the big enchilada, Max. Looking at the tarmac at Diego Garcia, looking at the frankly rather congested waterways of the Persian Gulf, with not one but 2 American aircraft carriers there now, all kinds of battleships deployed there. It's looking, and reading people like Scott Ritter, it's looking like well beyond the 11th hour, and that we may very well be on the brink of the once mythical war with Iran. First of all, tell us how likely that war is. And secondly, what you think the outcome of it will be, the implications of it, the reverberations of it.
Yeah, I really don't want to speculate on how likely it will be, because I can remember discussions in the US going back to 2008 on the imminent war with Iran taking place, and it never happened. So I don't want to get into punditry that embarrasses me later on. But you do have a president here who is waging gunboat diplomacy, appears somewhat crazed, maybe a little bit senile, but more importantly, completely captured by the bomb Iran elements within the US foreign policy establishment. What he's missing is something that George Bush had and relied upon to launch these neoconservative wars after 9/11, which is a base. There's no popular base within MAGA, although you do have a lot of cultists and bootlickers within that movement. You don't feel the same momentum to just take some country, some Muslim country, and smash it against the wall, as Michael Ledeen once called for doing. The Ledeen doctrine would be a tough sell for Trump's base, especially if there's a huge economic price, but he might do it. The cost would be obviously more severe than attacking Iraq, a country with a much weaker, less technologically sophisticated military and smaller population and less popular support for its leader. I believe within the Trump administration, there's a belief that a determined attack, including with tactical nuclear weapons on Iran and Iranian nuclear sites, could lead to regime change in Iran, which is extremely dangerous. And they're being told that by a lot of the CIA-backed Iranian dissidents in their ear. And what Iran is planning to do in response, they've sort of put on the table pretty openly. Press TV, the Iranian state-backed broadcaster, has published a list of potential Iranian targets across the region. One of them is the Diego Garcia Air Base. But there are all sorts of U.S. air bases within the range of Iranian ballistic missiles and drones, and including bases all across Iraq, which could also be attacked by popular mobilization forces. This would be damaging to the U.S. military for certain. If we look at the attack on the Al-Assad base in Iraq in 2018. But what doesn't seem clear to me is the decision-making within Iran. That's something I don't understand well enough. You have a reformist president
making a terrible mistake. China and Russia absolutely, and that's what Iran better. China and Russia absolutely want Iran and the United States to fight it out. That's gonna cripple the U.S. Just like Russia having to fight this terrible war with Ukraine, and they trying to push China to fight Taiwan. They're gonna put Trump making a terrible mistake, because the one he's gonna lose, it's gonna be in the U.S. empire fighting with Iran. Won't be no more nothing in the Middle East for them. But the Zionist is in control, so it probably is going to happen.
President Mahmoud Pezeshkian in power. I got to meet him briefly in New York at the UN General Assembly last year with his strategic affairs minister, basically his main advisor, Javad Zarif, and they were pushing peace. They were seeking a nuclear deal. That was at the top of their agenda, and they had been granted the latitude to make that trip to New York by the leader, the supreme leader of Iran and presumably the IRGC. They came back and they were subjected to harsh attacks by the principalist faction, which believes that the only way, possibly correctly, the only way for Iran to protect its strategic deterrence is through a real nuclear program. And they've been weakened ever since. And the deal that Donald Trump seems to be offering, as you said, George, earlier, is capitulation to Israel, disarming its forces, giving up its cards out in its near abroad like the Popular Mobilization Units, giving up its ballistic missile program, and then the US will move in and destroy what's left. That's for certain. So if Donald Trump doesn't put up something to give the reformist forces cover to make a deal domestically, I think we're careening towards some kind of conflict, but it could just be an escalation of the kind of conflict we've been seeing of assassinations and attacks on shipping. I'm not qualified to make a prediction.
Finally, you talked earlier, you alluded earlier, let's put some flesh on it, to the kidnapping. I mean, I just watched it before we came on air. The kidnapping of a young woman with a green card, perfectly legitimately in the United States, and having a green card entitled to, albeit limited, First Amendment protection under US law. She was literally kidnapped in broad daylight on the street by masked men and women because, as it turned out, as you said, she had attended some pro-Palestinian rallies. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I didn't know if this was a death squad, and I'm sure she didn't either. I didn't know if these were Israeli agents that were kidnapping this woman. They turn out to be agents of the United States government. And then I read this unhinged statement by Robert Kennedy about Columbia University. And I got to thinking sympathetically for you and Anya and everyone like you in the US. This situation is becoming dark and dangerous in the United States. Tell us how it looks to you.
Small.
It is a dark and dangerous situation because they're normalizing the criminalization of certain forms of speech that offend and disrupt the objectives of a foreign criminal apartheid state that has captured the US government. And so those of us who are considered to be disruptors, like me, are being targeted. I mean, I wasn't picked up by black masked Israeli censorship enforcers or ICE, as it's known here in the US, as Runesa Öztürk, this Turkish student at Tufts University, was on her way to an iftar dinner in the streets of Boston simply because she spoke out against Israel. But I was held at Dulles International Airport, returning from a vacation with my family last month, and questioned by a Customs and Border Protection officer days before Mahmoud Khalil was kidnapped and jailed thousands of miles from where he was living in New York. This is the Columbia University Palestine Solidarity activist. And I was asked questions about these very same figures who appear to be Palestine Solidarity activists, who are citizens, as well as those who are not. And I didn't know what it was about at the time. I didn't know what the names signified that I was being asked about. But the dragnet is widening. It is a very dark time, as we've seen, and it's affecting major institutions across the country, like Columbia University, where the Trump administration came in and said, we're going to suspend $400 million in federal grants to you as a research institution, which means you will become toothless and worthless unless you do what Israel wants. And your South Asian and Middle East Studies Department comes under the guidance and scrutiny of basically a pro-Israel administrator, that you ban masks on campus so that students can easily be identified and have their faces and identifications sent to the federal authorities if they protest, and so on. And Columbia immediately buckled, and they're going from campus to campus doing this. So it's a dark time. This is the worst attack on free speech in the United States since the McCarthy era, and it's all being done to protect the genocidal imperatives of a foreign state. And the outrage is just, it doesn't match the moment from what I'm seeing, because liberals, while they may want to support free speech principles or the First Amendment, have, first of all, whittled away at the First Amendment with their own censorious campaigns during the Trump era. And number two, they don't stand with the students on principle because many of them are uncomfortable opposing Israel. So the attack continues. And what I see in the UK is equally dark under the National Security Act, all these new national security laws, which have been used to hound my colleagues like Richard Medhurst because he is accused of praising Hamas. I mean, this is all about criminalizing anyone speaking out for Palestine. And it's only going to intensify unless the outrage and activism actually meets the moment.
May God protect you. Thank you, Max Blumenthal, author.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Excited to be with you as always. Got an interesting topic for you today. We underground. First thing that comes to mind is the analysis of efficiency and the cost of a vehicle like this. And I said, listen, maybe one day I'll take you to China and you see with your own eyes. Anyway, let's get into our topic here. So Iran, as I said, uncovered the missile deep. Yeah, it's deep missile city, if I may use the term. And I got some pictures for you here, guys. This is underground, very deep underground that Iran decided to disclose. So, and before I move on, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. If this is your first time here, I would greatly appreciate it, because the analysis you're hearing here, it's unique to this channel. And please make sure to share it with others around the world. So here is the link. I'm going to put it in the chat box for those who might be joining us for the first time.
Trump think he can get away with it.
So now the idea that Iran uncovering this missile city, yeah, interesting that it's like a city, because I took a look at some very variety of public sources, not the classified side, because I am not in the government. And even if I did, I will not be able to disclose that. But the question is, when you see this massive production underground, the first thing that comes to mind is this going to be now a nightmare for Israel? It's straightforward. Because for the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, known as the IRGC, unveiled this new missile city, and even for its aerospace forces. So the question becomes is, what kind of missiles are we looking at? What kind of weaponry that is under the bomb? They even had underground some types of naval assets. When I say naval assets, I'm referring to ships, small size. Those are compacted, but they are specific for that. So, and I will be showing you again some other pictures as I move forward. But first, let's do at least a brief description of what IRGC is. A lot of people do not even know what it is. So, and here's the thing.
It's the Special Forces of Iran.
Just for you to understand, the IRGC, and I have some pictures for you here. It's different types of IRGC. I give this credit of this picture to the European News Agency. So, and so when you look at IRGC, the structure of it, its organizational pyramid consists of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who is appointed, the supreme leader, I'm sorry, of the IRGC, who is appointed by the supreme leader, and the supreme leader, the deputy supreme leader. So in other words, they got the commander, vice commander. There are 3 layers into that. Then you have the chief of staff, who regulates relations between the 5 forces of the IRGC. The equivalency, the way to understand it in a simple term, the equivalency of our joint chief of staff. We have like all the branches of the military that we have, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Army. That's the same thing the IRGC have. So this one has like the 5 forces of the IRGC, which includes the ground force of the IRGC Corps. You have the Air Force, you have the Navy, you have the resistance force or Basij, and I wrote about it in my Iran book, and you have the Quds force. Now you remember who used to be the former commander of the IRGC. Does anybody know? The previous one, not the current one. So if you know, type it in a chat box. It's a well-known figure, and actually the developments of the IRGC, he is credited for that. Shelly, you got it. Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani, and we decided to take him out in Iraq. But here is one thing I can share with you about that. That intel was leaked from within the Iraqi government. Just FYI to let you know, because nobody knew about that movement of his at that time, except some elements inside the Iraqi government at that time. So, but that's a separate conversation for another day. So, now the Revolutionary Guard or the IRGC also include 2 other agencies, and you need to understand those agencies that operates directly under the supervision of the regime's supreme leader and reports to him directly. And this one, the office, is the representative office of the supreme leader and the general office of the maintenance of information of the Revolutionary Guard. Basically is the equivalency of the MI. And I was in MI in my military experience, what I served and all that. I served in the MI unit. So they do have similar to what we have, the military intelligence service. So that is what you need to understand about the IRGC. It's a very, very, very intertwined. There's a lot of moving parts into that particular entity. So now, when we think about why Iran did what it did as far as the revealing or unveiling the new missile city deep underground, we just did, by the way, yesterday. So why? It's because, first of all, he wanted to now show certain capabilities. They're not showing everything. You know, it's a smart move. Why would you want to show why would you want to disclose your plan? Why would you want to, it doesn't work that way. You always have to keep the wild card. And this is part of the wild card. This is not everything. So, because what this underground bunkers houses are thousands. They houses thousands of precision missiles. That's one of your key words right there.
For the U.S.
This is what the Iranian TV have reported, because it includes the Hyper Sikan. They include Qadr. Those are types of missiles. They include Sajil, Imad, Haj Qasim, which is Qasim is named after Soleimani, missiles. Those are the type, as well as there are other types of missiles that are solid and liquid fuel ballistic missiles. So when you look at, for example, as an example here, this is what the Houthis are using, but this is a different version of the one that Iran has, Dul Faqar. So, and here is one thing that you need to understand as far as how far those missiles go. And we give credit here to the Al Jazeera for this picture here. See this radius here, guys? The Iran ballistic missiles. You're looking from the Shahab first, that goes about 300 kilometers. Then Shahab 2 was 500. Then Zulfaqar, which is 700. Then you have Qiyam 1, which is 800. Then you move into the category of about 2,000 kilometers. You have the Shahab 3, Imad, and Qadr. Then you have Sajil and Khumanshar. Then you have one other type, the cruise missiles, that goes about 2,500 kilometers. Now, there is a reason why this is important to understand. So, and as I said, when you think about how this came about, how this Iran developed all this, you have to go back to the Iran-Iraq war, and specifically for one particular officer inside the Iran's IRGC back then. Okay, I'm going to take you to the NSCOM. You all remember the NSCOM, right? The United Nations Security Council. The United Nations Special Commission. That was Scott Ritter was part of that because it was tasked with the it's an inspection agency that oversaw the Iraq's weapons of mass so-called weapons of mass destruction after the Gulf War, which we all know how it turns out. There was no WMD. The war was based on a lie. Our invasion of Iraq was based on a lie. But beside the point. So now, roughly, because here is what you need to understand, roughly about 63% of Saddam Hussein back then, his missiles were fired at Iran during the war, which is what? This is where Iran prompted to create some sort of a missile command. This is why you have to understand how it's all started, because everything now Iran produces domestically. Yes, they get assistance from some other entities. To my knowledge, you get the Russians, of course, you get the Chinese to a degree, but mostly the Russians. Then you might even have some with the North Koreans. So to this day, the outlets continue to sing the praises of the IRGC officer. Why? Because he was the one who had the foresight to reverse engineer the Scud missiles. Remember, Iraq had the Scuds missiles. So, and instead of firing now the missiles, all of them, because after he reversed engineered that, instead of firing all of them on Iraq, it didn't, because that's what became the basis of Iran's missiles forces. So a lot of people do not know. They really do not understand how this all came about. So, and this is why it's important now to understand why Iran is doing this, providing or showing all this. Of course, there are some other, even state TV. The state TV has explained that this facility has also some naval assets or attack vessels and missile launchers are stored. So 500 meters deep down in Iran's southern waters, without providing any further details into all this. Now, what's interesting about this is that Iran revealed this military sites aimed at growing expectations of an escalation between Iran and the United States, and of course, in addition to Israel. This is why Iran decided to move forward with this particular move. So to President Trump, he's going to have to thank, because he's already made the mistake by going after the Houthis. Well, guess what the Houthis just did yesterday? They attacked Ben Gurion airport for the 6th time. So what happened to all bombing that we are doing in Yemen? Did it stop the Houthis? No, it didn't. No. And this is why Iran had to think very, very strategically as to when they will do all this. I'll take you back to January 10th of this year, because it was in January 10th, if you were, I don't know, you were there, whether you were paying attention to this or not, it was during the 10th of January of this year that the Iranian state TV broadcasted a rare footage of Salami. Salami is the current major, the guy who oversees, I thought I had a picture of him. No, I didn't. But anyway, Salam. Let me see if I can get you guys a picture to see who he is, because it's worth at least understand of Iran. Yeah, let me share a quick picture. Allow me here, guys. Just bear with me for a second. Images, and I'm gonna share it with you. And I thought I did. Oh, why that happens. That's part of being human. You forget things. So, okay, here's the picture coming up for you guys. And thank you for your patience. It is. So, this is the General Salami. So what happened with this one here? So, because on January 10th, it was a rare visit by him going to underground missile base. And this one, by the way, here is the key. It was that base that was used last October to launch the attack on Israel. That included, if you remember, there was a hypersonic missile. Of course, Iran doesn't want to show all its cards. It doesn't make any sense for them to do so. And this is where you start to think now, with Iran showing this at this time, it has a specific message to both the United States and Israel. But we're going to focus on Israel specifically. This is what, in my opinion, what is preventing Israel from attacking Iran. Because first of all, it won't be able to destroy, meaning Israel will not be able to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. Why? Because they are dispersed around the country. So I'm going to share a picture with you about the locations of where those nuclear facilities are. So sorry, it's in Arabic here, and I'm going to read it to you. You have Tehran, you have Fardo, you have Natanz, Isfahan, and Khandaq. Those are then you have Bushehr, right? Those are some of the known locations. Remember the keyword, known locations. And that's what's going to make it very challenging for Israel, to go ahead and attack those locations. Let alone some other 5 or 6 or 7 other challenges, which I'm going to share with you. And I coincide this with exactly what some other military analysts from overseas, not here in the US. There was a conversation inside the Pentagon back then. I remember back in the day when I was there, because it was a conversation about what should we do should we decide to attack Iran. And like in any military operation, you have what we call the menu. And the menu, you have options. One of them was a carpet bombing at that time. But it was a thinking, we didn't know, because Iran never disclosed what kind of capabilities it has. So, and that plan was shelved. So Israel, of course, couldn't do it by itself. And this is why you have to understand all these dynamics that happen in sort of conjunction with what's going on with the Houthis, with what's going on with Israel relaunching the war in Gaza, with what's going on with the US being trapped in Yemen, and also what's going on with some other Arab countries, especially in the Gulf, that are now worrying about what might be happening. And this is why I wanted to, there was an article by Ahmed Hafiz, and I'm going to share with you later on. So now let me talk to you about the key points that I see that could provide the problem. First one is that the nuclear program for Iran is not limited to one specific location. Like I mentioned, it's dispersed. So that's one. You need to understand this reason here. And this one, when you have some sort of a geographical area that is so widespread, across Iran is not a small country. It's very big. And when you have to consider, when you have to consider I'm getting distracted here because I'm getting some text here. So, when you have to consider that the locations are about over 15 locations. So what I showed you here is just limited, but even within the same region, we don't know. Like the region of Fardo, that is a big place. Isfahan, Natanz, all of them. So in total, you're looking at about 15, 16, 17 or even 18 to my knowledge locations. So this is what makes the challenge for Israel to consider targeting those. The other thing is you have these sites within Iran that consist of 4 types of nuclear reactors. You have one with 4, other one with heavy water production plants, which is about 3 or 4 of them. Then you have other 4 or 5 nuclear research centers. Then you have the other sort of 3 or 4 uranium enrichment sites. And of course, if you have all this, you have to have another aspect to that, which is what? Is the bomb body and the detonator manufacturing sites for all this. So let me play a clip for you guys, because I want you to hear this, and then we go from there. All right, let me get it here for you. I'm going to share a screen, and we go from there. And I'll continue on what the challenges that Israel will face if it decides to attack Iran.
You better not.
Over the last 2 years, there's been a series of tunnels constructed in a mountain near the Iranian nuclear site at Natanz. Now, these tunnel systems are really worrying both non-proliferation experts as well as intelligence analysts who've been monitoring the construction for years via satellite photos.
We compared the 2 entrance and exit of the underground facility, which we know the actual height, the elevation of those at the mountain, and we know the elevation of the mountain itself. And this underground facility we estimate to be anywhere between 80 and 100 meters below ground. The depth of the facility is a concern because it would be much harder to destroy using conventional weapons, such as like a typical bunker buster bomb. And so the Iranians are trying to build resiliency into their program, and it's evident here.
For its part, Iran says that its nuclear program is peaceful, that it follows and complies with the orders of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and that it does not seek to build.
Sorry, I wanted to stop this quickly here to tell you something about the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is corrupted, by the way. If you only know what happened in Japan, you remember when the Japanese decided to dump the nuclear waste? No, the IAEA, especially the guy, the head of, I forgot his name, the head of was in the take from the Japanese at that time. That's why you didn't hear much about it. So the IAEA has no credibility whatsoever. So I just wanted to point that out.
Build a nuclear weapon. However, over the last couple of months, we've heard Iranian officials increasingly talk about their ability to build a bomb should they choose to do so. Both America and Israel said they're not going to allow Iran to build a nuclear weapon, and both have been blamed for sabotage attacks on Iran's program in the past.
And of course, the sabotage, you are aware of the sabotage that the Israelis and the Americans embarked on for that. So, but the idea, which is true, that if Iran wanted to develop the bomb, it could have done so. Now it became evident to them. That's why they showed this type of missiles. But on the other hand, I am certain there is now a question inside Tehran, within the government, that because if Iran declared officially, openly, publicly, that they are in a possession of the bomb, Israel will have to think twice. The US will have to think twice, because it will be a form of deterrence, no more, no less. And this is why you are seeing the developments that is going on right now.
What experts fear is that this new construction could push what's been a shadowy conflict out into the open.
Okay. And by the way, when they said could push, because here is the thing, Iran already developed another nuclear location for its nuclear program. It took it 5 years to develop, from 2020. So it's because we didn't hold our end of the bargain. And this is why it came to the decision by the Iranian leadership that we reject negotiating with the Americans. It's because you can't trust the Americans. So that was the first point that I wanted to share with you. So now, what does it mean for the first point that I mentioned about Iran's nuclear program being dispersed? Is that it's going to be very, very hard and very challenging for Israel Air Force. You know, this is different than what Israel did to Iraq and Syria. Why? It's because when Israel attacked or destroyed the nuclear facility for Iraq, because it was only in one specific location. The same thing for Syria. Iran learned from that. They dispersed all that all around. So this is why the difference. Second challenge, it will be that hypothetically, should Israel wants to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, that one I mentioned to you, over 15, 16, 17 locations, they have to do them simultaneously, which Israel cannot. They won't be able to do that because they're going to have what they're going to need to have all this, because Israel will have to destroy the air defense systems for Iran. Israel will have to destroy the missile launchers, communications, satellite control systems, command, all of them. All of this has to happen all at once. There is no way they can do that. So, third challenge that I believe will be facing the Israelis is necessary the quantity of bombs needed to do all this. This is not a mission you're gonna go with 3 bombs, 4 bombs, and that's it. The quality and which Israel doesn't have the capability for destroying all these reactors. It just can't. And let alone the type of bombs, because those facilities, the one that I shared earlier in the picture, right? Where is it? Right, this one. Sorry, guys. Right here. Those are very deep down in the ground. Very deep. So Israel will have to secure large and massive quantities of these bombs that are capable of penetrating this kind of reactors. And I don't think so. It can do that. Otherwise, because you won't be able to destroy something like this in a single attack. And that's going to be challenging for them. So, number 4, that I believe will be also a challenge, if hypothetically, and I use the term specifically here, hypothetically decide, because Israel figure out they won't be able to. So it must secure the passage of aircraft over certain countries. Once again, let me bring this map back, and I'm going to read them for you since they are in Arabic. So you have Saudi Arabia, you have Oman, and I'm starting at the bottom right near the Arabian Sea. You have Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, you have Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan. Those are from the other side. We're talking about the Middle Eastern or Western part of Iran. So which means, because when you look at the big picture of where Israel is, and let me see if I could show a map here. It's unlikely. It won't. Yeah. When you look at where Israel is, look where Iran is. Well, the planes, the fighter jets will have to cross through the airspace of those countries. So which will be very challenging. Why is this? It's because that these countries will have to give the approval. And if they give the approval, which means what? They are part of the problem. They become a target also. And as a matter of fact, I will not see this much as a challenge. You know why? Because you can't trust those Muslim countries. Look what they are doing right now regarding the people in Yemen, the Houthis, or even in Gaza. Did any of them condemn anything? Like I always say, the pathetic Arab and Muslim leaders, they are spineless. They won't be able to do anything, because we will be able to force them, because we have say over all of them, no exception. Except you take Iran and the Houthis in this matter. And this is why that will be another challenge. And this specific one regarding the rights to fly over airspace of those countries, because it will be very challenging for those countries themselves, because once Iran find out that, for example, even though now Iran and Saudi Arabia have a diplomatic relations, But if you are to go and allow Israeli airplanes to go through your airspace to attack Iran, why will Iran maintain its diplomatic relations with Saudis? Because in this case, once Iran discover what those countries, they're going to become a target for Iran itself. Number 5, this one will be another challenge for the Israelis. Why? Because it requires refueling. Now, you only have 2 options for that. Either to land, and I remember when I used to travel for the US government back in the day, we will land in some countries. I remember sometimes we land in Azerbaijan, in Astana. Sometimes just for refueling. We'll stand for. Usually we step out because it wasn't a commercial flight anyway. We will step out. I'll go for a walk a little bit for 20 minutes or so because it will take about an hour or so. So which means in the case of Israel, we'll have to either land on those countries where they're going to be getting over or through, or it will have to have refueling in the midair. Well, who's going to do that in midair? Israel doesn't have those kind of capabilities. That means the US will have to do it, or maybe some other NATO countries, maybe. So, and this is why if the Israeli fighter jets will have to stop for refueling in those countries, that means those countries are assisting Israel in attacking Iran. So, and this brings back the sort of the question of whether those countries would agree to allow their airspace to be used by the Israelis. You have number 6 as a challenge, which this now takes us away from the military realm into the economic aspects. Once again, you look at where let me get the picture, where Iran is. And what do you see? You see the Strait of Hormuz, of course. And if you consider that 20% of the global oil shipment goes through this location right here. So what that's going to do to the economic front? Because if, hypothetically, once again, Israel decides to attack Iran, which I don't see that happening anyway, they're going to have to target also the economic infrastructure. And this one has to do with the oil facilities, which will lead into an increased prices around the world. This is what I'm saying. Everything is connected when it comes down to dealing with the geopolitical issues. You can't think only of one. Well, we got this F-35s. We're going to fly and bomb this and get out. No. It doesn't work that way. I made the same arguments. Literally, I made the same argument back in 2003 against the invasion of Iraq because I said, it's not going to be an easy walk. Oh, Mr. O, we're just going to go bomb this, liberate Baghdad, and we get out. I said, you won't. If you get in, you are in for the next 15, 20 years. And that's exactly what happened. There will be the same argument I will make regarding these aspects of if they are to go about thinking we're just going to go and bomb whatever. So economically speaking, this is going to now create more problems on the global economy. And if you know anything about it, for us here in the US, we depend on oil from the Saudis and all that. Even though we have so much oil here, it's cheaper for us to buy it than it is to reproduce it here. So, number 7, as I said, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed in this case. Iranians have the means to close it. The US said always, no, we're going to send an aircraft carrier. No. Look what just happened in the Red Sea. We couldn't defeat the Houthis or lift the blockade that's still till today in the Red Sea by going and sending the second aircraft carrier, which is this picture right here. This is the Carl Vinson. We already had the USS Harry Truman, which to my knowledge, but has not been reported, and it says that it was attacked by the Houthis. As to the extension of the damage, I do not know. And that's what I'm saying. In the case of the Strait of Hormuz, when you look at the map, Iran has that possibility. To my knowledge, There is already some ordnance in the water, right in this location of the Strait of Hormuz, just in case that Iran can activate. So basically, if that happens, what are we looking at? We're looking at the expansion of the scope of the war. And this is why I always say, attacking Iran, it's not going to be limited to that geographical location. It's going to expand. It will be the same thing if we make the mistake of sending our troops to Yemen. If we think we're going to, oh, it's just Yemen, it will become the graveyard. Because what you'll be looking at in this case of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, because this is going to open up a window, as I said, the expansion of the scope of the war, which will push other countries to get involved because of their strategic interests. I can tell you right now, I'm thinking about two right there, China and Russia. As a matter of fact, there is now a conversation. It's just a conversation. When I say conversation, it's not formal, about Iranians allowing for the Chinese to establish a naval base in Iran. Am I surprised? No, I'm not, because I talked about it back in 2018. I said, mark my word, down the road, if things move forward, we will see probably a Chinese or the Russians' naval presence in Iran, similar to what the United States has in Qatar or Bahrain with the 5th Fleet. So this is what I am thinking about. So, and the way I see it is the other point, just before I forget, the next one, 7th or 8th point, whatever that I'm thinking about, is the idea that Israel does not have sufficient air power to conduct this kind of approach. And that's why I just do not see the Israelis embarking on this, because they won't have the capabilities. And when you consider, like I shared earlier, when you consider the ranges of Iran's missile, I have another one here. This is from the CSIS, the Center for Strategic International Studies, I believe. I'm familiar with them. So when you look at all this, those are the ballistic and cruise missiles, which means look at the range, guys. It makes sense, because here's the interesting aspects. The interesting aspects about Iran is that they didn't want to develop anything beyond a 3,000 kilometer range. Why? Because they said we don't need it. They're not going to develop one that is a 4,000, 5,000 kilometers. They don't want that. What they want is to ensure that everything within range of targeting a presence of US or whomever will attack Iran. Look at the next one, and I'm going to give credit to NewsX. That's their picture. The same. Look at this one here, guys. Just look at the range. And it shows you right there. Each number corresponds with the range. Like Fatah, 110 kilometer, 110 is 300 kilometers. Shahab 1 is 300. Fatah 313 is 500. Shahab 2 is 500. Zulfaqar 700. Qiyam 1 is 800. Shahab 3, 2,000. Yeah. Hormazbar is 2,000. And Hormazbar 4 is 2,000. And there is one that is 2,500 kilometers. But look at the locations, and specifically look at this within the 300 kilometer range. What do you have? You have United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq. Then you move a little bit towards the sixth, which is number 6 here, will be about 700 kilometers. That goes between Saudi Arabia all the way to 800. And why is this important? Because that's where the US military presence is there. And that's why it makes more sense, in my opinion, for Iran to go ahead and show what its capabilities are regarding the missile. This is why to Iran, missile discussions is off limit, is a red line. And what the US wants to do to pressure Iran to go back to the negotiating table by negotiating two things instead of just one, negotiating the JCPOA and also the missile technology. And Iran said, first of all, missile technology is a red line. That's off the table. And second, JCPOA, we are not going to talk till you lift the sanctions that are imposed after the agreement was reached between the P5+1. And that's, to me, Iran was thinking in terms of, why should we even bother with this? Let's just do it through a third party, which means third party, there is nothing specific about it. So, because if there is no direct contact, this is exactly what I'm seeing happening now in Far East, especially when it comes down to South China Sea. And I'll be addressing this with Professor Anna Manda, because I see the purpose of the trip of the Secretary of Defense to the Philippines and Japan, then Guam and Hawaii. So, but we'll focus on Japan and Philippines, but mainly the Philippines. I see the same thing, is to give marching orders to the Philippines, basically pushing the Philippines over the cliff, then go to Japan and secure their contribution into more conflicts with the Chinese. So the same arguments I can make about this one here. So it behooves those countries, the likes of Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, even Iraq. I go now as far as Iraq itself, which they couldn't take stand and tell the US, no, you're done here. You pack your stuff and get out. Because there is one country in Africa that did this to the US. Can you guys name which country asked the Americans to leave? And I'm going to check the chat box. If you can tell me which African country did push the US out. Let me see in the chat box. No, not Somalia. It was Burkina Faso. And actually also Niger. Because we had a treaty with them and they said, you know, it's over. We don't want you here anymore. And we give you a time frame. They gave a time frame for the Americans to pack their stuff and leave. And they had to leave and they left. So why is Iraq not doing the same? That's my argument, the way I see it. But for the other countries, Bahrain, because remember, in Bahrain, we have the 5th Fleet. Qatar has the largest military presence of the US in the region. United Arab Emirates has a presence there. So Kuwait, of course, we have the infantries over there. So that shows you right there, but they're going to become a target because any launch of attack against Iran is going to have to be launched from there. So even if you send the aircraft carriers, where the aircraft carrier is going to be refueling? It's common sense. And this is why, to me, literally, it makes perfect sense as to a strategic move regarding what Iran is doing, because they think pragmatically. As I argued in my Iran book, don't think just because the way they dress, whatever. They are as shrewd and as smart as they can be. And it's just for us, we don't think in these terms. Yeah. Because we think, oh no, they're not gonna. Here is what I wrote back in my Iran book to those who got a copy of the Iran book. Here is what I wrote. Let me share this with you quickly here. So according to NSCOM, according to NSCOM, roughly 63% of Saddam's missiles were fired at Iran during the war, prompting it to acquire and create a missile command. To this day, outlets continue to sing the praises of the IRGC officer who had the foresight to reverse engineer Scuds as opposed to firing them at all at Iraq. This becomes the basis of Iran's missile forces. And that's why it makes perfect sense how Iran is moving strategically. They're not going to play all their cards. Those the bunkers where they have, those are not bunkers. This is like cities underground. So when you have a short naval attack boats, it tells me you have to develop some major structures over there. Now, this is not an easy stuff here. That's why I don't believe Israel will be in a position to. And it's exactly what General Hussein Salami. Now, don't confuse Hussein Salami with Soleimani. They are two separate. Qasim Soleimani, who was the head of the IRGC, already was taken out, but this is the current one. His name is Sayyid Hussein Salami. So that's his name. So for him to show up and all this, that just tells me they send in a message loud and clear to the Israelis, like I put it on the thumbnail: don't be stupid. Or we're ready for a war if you want one. And a war with Iran, it will be nothing compared to what we've ever seen before in the region. And again, I am talking based on my knowledge, on the research that I conducted regarding Iran. So it behooves us to think twice. And I don't understand why Trump, I understand that his limitations in understanding what geopolitics is all about is very, very limited, to say the least. No, I don't shy away from saying it. I give credit to credit when it's due, but I also understand how manipulative Donald Trump is. So you give the American people something to chew on, keep them distracted. This is why now you are seeing, oh, Doge is doing this and Doge is doing that, finding corruption. Yes, it exists. But how about going to where the fraud is, where the waste is, by cutting the U.S. Department of Defense budgets? We're spending all over $1 trillion when you add the supplemental bill to the defense budget. $855 billion. Add the supplemental bill, you cross $1 trillion. You get the 10 most advanced NATO members combined, and they won't even reach the level we are spending. So if Donald Trump really wants peace in the world, as he claimed, then you go and cut that down. And second, why would you launch the attacks against the Houthis or trying to threaten Iran? Because that's not a language. Do you think a country is not going to stand up? And now he even advocating for, well, we need to fight the Chinese. Really? Do you have any idea what will become of us here? You know, it's to me, it's a pragmatic argument. You know, you gotta think hard about the consequences of, not that other countries have to be scared of us, and that era is gone. I mean, we couldn't even come out victorious, so-called victorious in Afghanistan and Iraq. What makes us think we're gonna come victorious against the Chinese? I mean, let's be honest about it. And that's why I don't think so Trump thinks logically or pragmatically, and those around him, they're just being used. There is a hidden hand, like I always say, that controls the direction of the policies of all this. And that's how I see it. So, all right, guys, that's all I have to share with you. It just
Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please smash that subscribe button. Also consider being a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amounts in the link given in the description box. We rely on you. Without further ado, let me welcome Professor Muhammad Marandi. Professor Marandi is a professor at the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you very much for inviting me again.
Last time we discussed the U.S. attack on Yemen, and President Trump said that any shot fired by the Houthis would be considered shots fired at the behest of Iran, and Iran would be made responsible for that. Can you comment on how tense the situation is in terms of an escalation of war between Iran and the United States?
Obviously, what Trump says is nonsense because he is denying Ansarullah and the government of Yemen agency. They are independent and they are enforcing a blockade on shipping linked to the Israeli regime because they are, in their own words, implementing the Genocide Convention. And Iran supports them. Iran supports them and other parts of the axis of resistance. But Iran doesn't make decisions for Hezbollah, it doesn't make decisions for Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Ansarullah or Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces. So what Trump says is nonsense, and he cannot force the Yemeni armed forces to stop what they consider to be necessary to put pressure on the Israeli regime to stop the genocide. So what Trump is doing is he's trying to have an excuse both to bomb Yemen. So he's bombing Yemen in order to help the Israeli regime carry out genocide. He's killing people in Yemen to help the Israelis kill people in Palestine. That's basically it. And also he wants to use this as a means to put pressure on Iran, which is not going to work either. There is a possibility of military confrontation or military aggression, to put it more appropriately, by the United States against Iran. But Iran has already said that if the United States strikes, Iran will strike back harder. That's something that Ayatollah Khamenei said. So Iran is not going to be deterred from supporting Yemen. It's not going to be deterred from supporting the Palestinians or Hezbollah or any other member of the axis of resistance. And what the United States needs to do is to stop the genocide. Trump gave the green light for Netanyahu to tear up the ceasefire agreement. Witkoff gave the Israeli regime the green light to tear up the peace agreement or the ceasefire agreement. And Witkoff himself, he pretends as if it's the fault of Hamas, but Hamas was abiding by the ceasefire that he negotiated. But Witkoff himself and Trump want to allow the Israelis to violate the ceasefire. And then when Hamas doesn't accept that, they give the green light for the genocide to restart. This is the dystopian world that the United States has created for humanity.
Do you see this campaign in Yemen to be a very long one? I wrote to Helen Lechner to interview on Yemen. I mean, she is one of the person who knows the region so well, and she said that I'm right now traveling and I'd be able to do something on April 3. And I said, can't you do immediately because the moment is important? And she said that if my senses are correct, I see this campaign to go on for a long time. And it seems plausible because I don't see anyone stopping the Israelis from carrying out or continuing the genocide, and Ansar Allah would keep on responding. So if that's the case, and the American participation in genocide in Yemen this time, or bombing campaign in Yemen, is different from the previous campaign, because at that time they were doing it at the behest of the Saudis and the UAE, who are at best their allies. But now Tel Aviv is kind of their master, so their lunacy might be even more. So do you see this campaign to be a long one, and what implication that it would have on US-Iran relationship? Is any kind of normalization dead for the next 4 years?
It's difficult to say if it's going to be a long campaign because in war, things happen that are unexpected, and then everything changes. So it's very difficult to even predict what will happen next week. I think the intention of the United States is to continue bombing Yemen. And that will come at a great cost for the United States. Because remember, this is not their neighborhood. They have to, when they want to bomb, when they want to bring ships, it's very costly. They're spending billions of dollars effectively by striking, through striking Yemen. And the Yemeni military is very deeply entrenched underground because they've been going, they've survived a decade of airstrikes and genocidal airstrikes. Just recently, a mutual friend of mine and yours said that, strictly speaking, what Yemen is doing is against international law because they're blocking international shipping, which I don't find this to be a valid argument because what the United States and the Israelis are doing is they're carrying out genocide. They're carrying out a Holocaust. They have no legitimacy. If we want to speak, very legalistically, the United States no longer has the regime in Washington has no legitimacy because of its actions in Gaza, and of course, the same is true with the Israeli regime. So, my understanding is that the regime in Washington, Trump, will continue these airstrikes because he is in full support of the genocide. He is a partner in this genocide. But the problem is that this could have consequences. Ultimately, those regimes that are complicit with the United States in our region, like Qatar, like the Emirates, like Saudi Arabia, like Bahrain, they may face severe consequences because they have enabled the United States to carry out airstrikes. US bases in these countries and these entities are being used for different purposes to wage war. And so at some point, Yemen may decide to punish these regimes. They may punish the Saudis. And as we all know, all of them are extremely vulnerable. All of them, except for Bahrain, all of them have huge oil or gas reserves, and they produce enormous amounts of oil or gas, and they are key to the global markets. So if Yemen decides to retaliate against one of these regimes, then that could change the equation completely. It may lead to further intensification. It may lead to the United States backing down. We don't know what's going to happen. But at least for now, I think that the United States will continue to bomb because the United States wants to make things as easy as possible for the Israeli regime to continue the slaughter.
Just to place on the record, the Warzone website says that a squadron of US B-2 Spirit stealth bombers are already in its way to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. For our viewers who don't know it, it's one of those 900 military bases for the United States across the world in the Indian Ocean. You mentioned about a mutual friend. I'm not sure who it was, but I want to mention.
You to name that friend.
No, I want to mention someone, Scott Ritter, who has recently said that if the U.S. goes on a war with Iran, he said it would be a I'm blanking on what he said, but he said it would be a nation eliminating exercise or something. I don't remember the exact word. I wonder what your response to that, given you know him so well.
Well, we haven't met in person, but I've been on his show a couple of times, and we follow each other, and I've watched his debates and discussions, and he's acquainted with what I have to say. First of all, this is this basically confirms what I was saying, that the United States has no legitimacy. It's an illegitimate regime. A regime that is willing to wipe out a nation has no place in the civilized world. And strictly speaking, it has no right to have a seat at the UN Security Council, let alone the General Assembly. That's because if we want to speak about law, then the fundamental law is the gravest violation of law is genocide and the Holocaust, which the Israeli regime is carrying out. So if the United States has such an intention towards Iran, that means that the United States has lost its legitimacy. That doesn't mean it's going to go away. I'm not saying that it's going to collapse. I'm just saying that such a regime has no legitimacy, just like the Israeli regime has no legitimacy. But the United States has failed in all its wars ever since the Second World War. And unless we include Panama or, these sorts of wars. But the United States does not have the ability to wipe out Iran unless it wants to use nuclear weapons. And if it uses nuclear weapons, that's the end of the United States. The world won't tolerate this. The world will turn against the United States, and it would expose the world to not just Iranians, but the entire region, if not the world, to contamination. And that would be unforgivable. I don't think the United States really could survive that. But if the United States wants to carry out a conventional war against Iran, let me be very blunt. Iran will defeat the United States. The United States can't defeat Iran. It would destroy the United States. First of all, the United States cannot mobilize 1 million people and bring them to the Persian Gulf. It doesn't even have a place to take these soldiers before attacking Iran, because all of the regimes in the region are weak and vulnerable. Qatar wouldn't last a day. The Emirates wouldn't last a week. Saudi Arabia wouldn't last a month. All their oil and gas facilities would be gone, and their regimes would be washed away. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, they'd all be gone very swiftly. So where are they going to take all those soldiers? Second of all, the United States doesn't have the money and the wealth that it had before 9/11. This is a different world, and this is a different United States. The United States has huge problems at home, enormous political divisions, and enormous economic problems. And Trump gathered a significant number of votes, including Scott Ritter's, by claiming that he's a peacemaker. So a war with Iran would destroy the U.S. economy. It would drive oil and gas prices through the roof. And I'm talking about $400, $500 a barrel, because there will be no oil anymore from the Persian Gulf or the West Asia at large. And there will be no gas. And there will be no tankers. This will not be a 1 week, 2 week, 3 week thing. It will be permanent. So that would shut down all factories, that would shut down businesses across the globe. And then when the global economy collapses in a way which we have never seen, and it would be worse than 1929, the movement of people towards Europe and the United States would make what we're seeing now look like nothing, as Europe and the United States collapses too. So I think that there are more than enough people in the United States that recognize that war would be catastrophic. And it would be catastrophic for everyone. It would be catastrophic for India. It would be catastrophic for China. And who would they blame? They would blame the United States, because Iran is not violating international law. Iran's peaceful nuclear program is in accordance with the regulations of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the NPT. And we just saw that the United States has declared that Iran's nuclear program has no deviations. So there would be no justification. So basically, the threat of war against Iran would devastate the US economy. It's not even possible for the United States because they cannot mobilize to fight Iran. And Iran has a very powerful drone and missile capability that the United States has no answer to. So if it's conventional, the United States would lose and it would destroy the global economy and they would be to blame. If it's nuclear, then the world will judge what the United States. It would be over for the United States. It would be over for Israel as well. I don't see that as a realistic scenario.
Yeah, I think you made several.
Just one point. I'm not saying that there will not be war, though. There is I'm sure in the Pentagon they're saying no, but I'm also sure that Zionists and especially the religious fanatics, they're pushing for war, especially Netanyahu, especially because of the internal crisis in Palestine, in Israel, within the Israeli regime. Society is badly divided, and the issue of Shin Bet and the Supreme Court, this is becoming critical now. And of course, they need a war, therefore, Netanyahu, to distract attention away from the crisis at home. That's why they expanded the war in Lebanon. That's why they restarted the genocide in Gaza. It's all about Netanyahu and his allies. So while he has benefited from all this genocide, this is destroying the Israeli regime because the world sees this as an illegitimate and genocidal regime.
I think the point about a conventional war is extremely important, given they don't have the ability to mobilize people, either in the United States or in their ally regions. It's impossible to get personnel to go there and die. And there is no. If one looks at the U.S. economy now, it's limping already. Like the deficits are 6 to 7%. They are trying to contain it to 3%, which is like a crazy dream. They have been juicing up their economy through fiscal deficit for a very long time, and it's the moment they cut back on the deficit, the economy would contract from 2% to maybe like 1%, or no one knows. And the bond market is already reacting very negatively. Not just the foreign central banks, but even the U.S. private bond holders, the big players, the PIMCO and the BlackRocks, they are shifting away from U.S. Treasury bonds away to Germany and Australia and whatnot. So the war expenses is impossible to think of. And I think that this brings us to the nuclear question, given the U.S. And Scott Ritter alluded to that, given the U.S., unlike India and China, I don't support Indian nuclear weapon program, but just to place on record that we have a no first use principle. So does China have it, but the US doesn't have it. And Israel, which has nuclear weapons, it doesn't have any transparency at all. Given that situation, I just wonder what your thoughts are, or what do you think would be the future of the Iranian nuclear principles and programs? Because the recent intelligence community report on Senate says that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. The 2003 abandonment of its nuclear programs are still on, and it refers to the Supreme Leader Khomeini's fatwa. But if this continues, what is the future of Iranian nuclear program?
There are a couple of things here. One is that the United States admits that since 2003, as you rightly point out, that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons. I would add that before 2003, Iran was never pursuing nuclear weapons. That's just a fact. But in any case, at least there is an agreement that for the last 22 years, Iran has not been pursuing nuclear weapons. So the threats being made against Iran are violations of international law. Not just any attack. An attack would be a a clear act of aggression. But threats against Iran are violations of international. Iran's nuclear program is the country's right. Before the revolution, the nuclear program had been initiated with Western support. But since Iran is now a sovereign and independent country and it's no longer a client regime like other regimes in the region, the West has determined that Iran should not have a peaceful nuclear program. Iran simply will not accept that. Nuclear energy for Iran is important. Iran right now produces electricity. Iran produces medicine. It uses nuclear energy in different fields. And it wants to be able to make sure that it can produce its own enriched uranium in case supplies are cut off at some point. We're a country where the United States imposes maximum pressure sanctions. Iran wants to be as doesn't want to be vulnerable. It wants to be as well protected as possible. But then, of course, there's the other issue, and that is Iran is the threshold state, and that is, I think, linked to the fact that the Israeli regime has nuclear weapons, and the United States has threatened Iran with nuclear weapons before. Hillary Clinton once threatened Iran with nuclear weapons. And the Israeli regime, just during the genocide, one of their government ministers threatened Gaza with a nuclear weapon. So when you have such sinister actors, meaning the regime in Washington and the regime in Tel Aviv, the Iranians obviously will want to keep an eye on their national. They want to be very careful about their national security. And so, an advisor to the leader, Dr. Kharazi, said, I think 3 times, maybe over the last year or so, or year and a half or so, that if there is an imminent or threat to Iran's existence, or an existential threat to Iran, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Then Iran will reconsider its nuclear posture. And Iran's nuclear program is very developed. It's one of the top 10 most developed nuclear programs in the world. Iran's missile defense capabilities, Iran's missile capabilities in general are among the best in the world. So the Iranians they're not foolish. They know that when the United States is threatening the country and the future of the country, the very existence of the country, or the Israelis are doing the same. Remember, these are genocidal regimes that wipe out nations. I don't know if you saw the exchanges in the Signal group where Vice President Vance, when he was told that a civilian building collapsed, killing everyone inside, he said, great, something like that in Yemen. The interesting thing, of course, is that they didn't kill any of the top leaders, contrary to what they thought they did or they claimed that they did. None of the senior military or political figures of Ansarullah and the Yemeni government have been killed or martyred in these airstrikes, contrary to what the Americans are saying. But they destroy a civilian building, murdering everyone inside, and then they celebrate. These are the sinister monsters that Iran is dealing with. So obviously, while Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, but the Iranians are very careful about the intentions, the actions, and the behavior of Washington and Tel Aviv.
My last question in this regard for our interview today is the Russia angle, because Iran had a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty with Russia signed in January 2025, which entails a whole range of things. It's a 20-year program. Agreement covers a whole range of things, but including defense, including defense agreements. Of course, it's not there is no contingent agreement clause that if Iran is attacked, Russia has to come in support. But geopolitically thinking, it's a no-brainer that Russia would not let the U.S. pummel Iran just like that. Some people think that Trump is serious in Ukraine. Others are now heavily questioning it, but at least some people think he is serious there. But if he is serious in Ukraine, if he is serious in normalizing relationship with Russia, does he not understand that Russia and Iran has such a comprehensive relationship, or is the Middle East policy completely taken over by the Zionist lobby, and Trump has no idea of what's going on?
Well, the regional policy of the United States is definitely in the hands of the Zionist regime. Remember, Trump said he was going to be a peacemaker, but now he gave the green light to the continued Holocaust in Gaza. This is really unbelievable. The crimes that are being committed today in front of the eyes of the world are unprecedented. We've had crimes throughout history, but never for a year and a half in front of everyone. This is the first time that such a thing has happened, and the United States simply won't quit. So Trump is just as genocidal as Biden, if not worse, because he openly endorses the slaughter of women and children. And today, in particular, they massacred kids who were praying, and then they massacred people who were seeking food. It's just stunning how disgraceful the United States and the Israeli regimes are.
I just wanted to add that as we speak, the UN humanitarian agency OCHA has confirmed 142,000 displacement in Gaza since March 18, as they resumed the genocide. Just wanted to.
And remember, they've blocked food and medicine and water from entering Gaza for over 3 weeks now. They've imposed starvation on women and children. It's just unbelievable. It's like one of those sinister Hollywood movies where you have this really sinister looking person who's just out to kill people. This is what the United States is. This is what Israel is. It's like a Hollywood. It's like, how could anyone do this? How could anyone think like this? How could anyone behave like this? It's just impossible to imagine, but it's happening in front of our eyes. One thing that before responding to the question is that I wanted to add something to the previous question or my previous response. And that is that to show how humane Iran is and how moral Iran is in contrast to the immorality of the West, and how Iran is honest about its nuclear program, I refer you back to the 1980s when the West was giving Saddam Hussein, who was an ally of theirs back then before they turned against him, when they gave him chemical weapons to use against Iranians and against his own people, they also gave him military intelligence and political cover to get away with it. At that time, senior Iranian leaders went to the leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, and asked for permission to produce chemical weapons. And he said no. He said, we don't accept such weapons. Ayatollah Khomeini's position on chemical weapons and nuclear weapons is the same. So while the West is busy carrying out genocide, Iran's position, Iran's religious position, continues to be what it was during the war. During the war, when chemical weapons were being used against us, I survived 2 chemical attacks. I survived both a mustard attack in 1988 and a nerve agent attack in the I think it would be 1984. The Iranian calendar is different. By the way, it's the Iranian New Year now, so congratulations to your viewers who celebrate Nowruz. Thank you. So that is the second point. But to respond to your question, obviously the the Zionist lobby has control over Washington. It's not just about policy in West Asia and North Africa. Right now, they're arresting people. Like you see these Gestapo agents coming up to young women and taking them away on the streets of the United States. You see people expelled from the country simply because they support Palestine. It's just stunning. People, journalists are being arrested in Europe. It's amazing what's going on. And these people are not even criticizing like the United States for a lack of freedom at home or because of corruption at home. They're protesting about a Holocaust that's taking place on another continent, and they're being crushed. So, but this I think also shows that the Zionist regime is growing weak, because the more brutal and the more barbaric they are in the region, and I think restarting the genocide was a catastrophic mistake for the regime, because for a while people were the world would have breathed a sigh of relief that the genocide stopped, even though they were killing Palestinians every day during the ceasefire, more than like roughly 3 a day, and Lebanese as well. But the world was happy that the slaughter stopped. But then when they restarted it, it just outraged everyone even more, because this was supposed to stop. And then suddenly, for no reason, for no justification, they started this again. This is not going to end well for the regime. None of this is going to end well for the West and the United States in particular, and of course, Trump, because the world is turning against us. Even in Europe and the United States, people are increasingly seeing the reality, and you see boycotts of US goods, and brand America is dead. So no one believes that the United States is a land of freedom or a land of where democracy reigns. The media, we don't know any about these arrests through the media. We know them through social media, and even social media is being, closely monitored, and accounts are removed, and shadow banning is intensified. But despite all that, because of the sheer brutality of the United States and the Israeli regime, the word is getting out. So this is not going to end well for the United States. U.S. policy in the region has always been founded upon the needs of the Israeli regime. The dirty war in Syria was before the Israeli regime. They supported ISIS and Al Qaeda and brought them to power in Syria because of the Israeli regime. The destruction of Libya was because of the Israeli regime. The invasion of Iraq, the destruction of the whole region, is basically to help the Israeli regime rule supreme in the neighborhood. They want broken countries, fractured countries at each other's throats, so that the Israelis could expand, so that it could thrive, so that it could carry out further ethnic cleansing. That is has been the foreign policy of the United States for decades, and it continues to be the same now with Trump. The only difference is that Trump is much more crude, and I think this in a strange way is good for the rest of the world, because the hypocrisy is gone, and even the most naive are opening their eyes.
We'll leave it there, Professor Marandi. Thank you so much for joining.
Let's go ahead and get right into today's video. There are definitely a few things I want to go ahead and talk about in this video. The whole 23andMe situation, if you're not aware, they are a biotech company that people gave their DNA to. And since I'm talking about it on this channel, you can see that did not go well. I also want to go ahead and talk about this portal that was seen over the United Kingdom. And this topic, to me anyway, is scarier than it should be, but not for the reasons you think. Is it also plausible that the pyramids of Giza may be an ancient data center powering something? I came across a very interesting article back in 2024. There are also other topics I do want to go ahead and discuss, but with that being said, let's go ahead and first start with this whole 23andMe situation. So like I said, 23andMe, they are a biotech company which specializes in genetic testing. What you would do, you would buy this kit, you would take this tube out, spit inside this tube, mail this tube off, and 23andMe, they would analyze this spit, analyze your DNA to see who you're related to, your genetic makeup, your ancestry, and so forth. People generally do this to see if they are a prince or a prince. I said, I'm going to be serious when it comes to this topic, because this, at the end of the day, it's a very serious topic. But yeah, people, they generally do this to see if they are some kind of royalty or something along those lines. But yes, to be fair, people do these ancestry tests for a multitude of different reasons. So if you're in the comments and you're like, I did this and I did not want to know if I was royalty, I just wanted to see if my meemaw was my peepaw. Look, I get it. But here's the thing. There were a ton of different commercials on TV and even ads on the internet. When you're browsing websites, you would see 23andMe advertisements pop up, goading you into sending them your DNA. There were a lot of people out there, including myself, that felt like something was off about this. You're going to give this one company not only all your information, but they're also going to have your DNA on file as well. I mean, how many of us today really read the fine prints? After many people sent 23andMe all this information plus their DNA, news started to come out that there were a ton of data breaches involving 23andMe. And not just that, there were a lot of people high up in 23andMe, including CEOs, that were stepping down. 23andMe, they are now in bankruptcy, and the current CEO, Ann Wojcicki, and that name may sound familiar to you because she was the sister of Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of, or the ex-CEO of YouTube. Since 23andMe have went into bankruptcy and the CEO has stepped down, they are looking for a new buyer. And this new buyer, they can come in and transform 23andMe into anything they want. And at the same time, they have all this sensitive information plus all of this DNA. Ever since this news has come out, concerns have been raised about what would happen to this sensitive information of more than its 15 million users. In 23andMe's bankruptcy announcement, they went on to say that the data privacy of its customers would be an important consideration in any sale, but federal law does little to secure genetic information given over to a private company, two legal experts on data privacy said. So they said they will consider it, but they don't have to. The article I'm reading from goes on to quote Suzanne Bernstein, counsel at the nonprofit Electronic Privacy Information Center. She goes on to say that often if there's so much personal data that a group has, it's maybe in a hospital setting or a research setting and can be governed or by more meaningful safeguards. So again, your DNA is floating out there and you don't know where it could be. This story reminds me of that Idaho 4 crime case. If you're not familiar, there were 4 young adults in a sorority house in Moscow, Idaho, while all their lives were ended in a very horrible manner. The weapon used was a knife. Well, for quite some time, the police in Moscow, they were having difficulties finding the individual that was behind this crime. What was left behind the scene, though, was the knife sheath. And on this knife sheath was DNA. I don't know if it was touch DNA, blood, or something along those lines, like saliva. I don't think they ever said, but there was DNA on the sheath. This DNA was used in investigative genetic genealogy, where investigators, they went to public ancestry sites like MyHeritage and GED Match, and they were able to find the person who may or may not have been the person behind this horrible incident, that person being Brian Koberger, through the use of ancestry websites where he had uploaded his DNA. Now, while people are in support of this and they were able to find the suspect of this horrible crime, Other people, and news has come out where other people are saying that this may raise privacy concerns, that your DNA that you give to these companies and they tell you that they are not going to do anything else with it, well, police and investigators, they can now go to these companies and access your DNA to match you to any given crime scene. You may be saying, well, that does not matter to me because I'm not going to commit any crimes. But people can be set up. And not just that, if we're talking about touch DNA, you can touch something at a store and not buy it. Your DNA will be on that item for weeks, if not months. Somebody else can buy that item, commit a horrible crime. They can leave it at the scene, and now your DNA is at the scene. Investigators can match that DNA to something you left at an ancestry site. When it comes to the Idaho 4 case, there are so many oddities about that case and things that have come out that do not sit right with people, that people really do feel like Brian Kohberger is being set up. With people giving all their DNA and information to these ancestry sites, we're going to see more people end up like Kohberger. What are those mini burgers called? Sliders. We're going to see a bunch of co-sliders. Other people who are talking about this are also giving another good point when it comes to insurance companies. Insurance companies, they can run your DNA to see if any conditions run in your family, like heart conditions, and they can deny you. You don't think that's possible? Well, articles did come out back in 2018. 4 risks consumers need to know about DNA testing kit results and buying life insurance. And they even mentioned 23andMe and stating how life insurers and other insurance companies, depending on the state, they can definitely get your DNA and genetic results to determine whether they should pay out or not, because maybe you lied about a family member or family history of heart disease. But this article ends with that people are worried due to this bankruptcy. They're worried about their DNA. But it does go on to say that everybody's worried about what a new company can do with the data, and that is a concern. But frankly, some other things that people are worried about, 23andMe already can do or already does, because again, people do not read the fine print. And 23andMe, they now own your data once you send it to them. Because again, people do not read the fine print. They don't understand that once they give their DNA, their saliva over to 23andMe, that it now belongs to them and they can do whatever they want with it. There are news articles now telling people that they can delete their data, delete their DNA from 23andMe system, but let's see what happens. Now, in other news happening around the world, people in the United Kingdom yesterday, they saw this. Many people over in the United Kingdom, they took multiple photos. They said they saw it actually open up and they thought it was some kind of portal or some kind of ship was coming through. But of course, as always, there is an answer to this. Now, Cape Canaveral, where SpaceX launches, is about 4,000 miles away from where the sighting had occurred over in the United Kingdom. And yet, that's what they're saying that these people saw. They saw SpaceX dumping fuel. And I made a video on this about a month ago where I said, no matter the location, no matter the distance, no matter the object, no matter how strange the sighting may be, people will now say it's just SpaceX and forget about it. SpaceX has now become the new swamp gas, weather balloon, or Venus. Now, what's interesting, like I said, they said that this was fuel that was being dumped by SpaceX. But 2 years ago, somebody made a post and they said, was the recent blue spiral over Hawaii really a SpaceX rocket dumping fuel? Because when people over in Hawaii saw this blue spiral in the sky that was very similar to what people in the United Kingdom had seen, news and media, they instantly came out and said that this was SpaceX dumping fuel before SpaceX even confirmed they were dumping fuel. But people, they said, hold on now. They were quick to call out the statement. They said the speed of the blue spiral is much too slow. A rocket or parts of the rocket at that altitude would travel over the sky much faster. They were also saying things like how the SpaceX rocket launch occurred 12 hours before this sighting. They also asked, is the trajectory consistent with a SpaceX rocket launch from Florida? Was it launched in a great circle over Hawaii? Still a valid question. They also go on to ask, at what time was this filmed? Are parts of a hypothetical rocket at that spot in the sky in Earth's shadow? But it later came out that this blue spiral that people saw over Hawaii was not SpaceX dumping fuel, but it was SpaceX launching a satellite. So what is it? What did these people see over the United Kingdom? Did they see SpaceX dumping fuel, or did they see SpaceX launching a satellite? Or was it something else altogether? You can see in this exact same video here in Hawaii back in 2023, the same exact thing that people were saying they saw over the United Kingdom. This object just opened up and turned into what looked like to them a portal. But again, while they're saying that jet fuel caused this sighting in the United Kingdom, they are saying what was seen over in Hawaii was now a satellite.
Mystery solved. Now, this past Wednesday, the Subaru telescope on Mauna Kea captured video of this mysterious light over Hawaii. Check it out. Well, guess what? It is not a UFO, they confirmed. It turns out that the so-called flying spiral is actually a new satellite that was launched earlier that day by SpaceX. Sure, it launched all sorts of theories, so thanks to them for clearing up.
But it's not just conflicting information about what was seen over Hawaii. Going all the way back 15 years ago, spirals were also seen in Norway, and people could not figure out what was causing these spirals. And well, what was the explanation? Well, they were not using SpaceX back then. They were saying how it was a missile launch.
Scientists from all over the world are trying to figure out what caused a mysterious blue light to spiral in the sky over Norway on Wednesday. CBS News correspondent Sheila McVicker has the latest on the mystery. Sheila, good morning.
Good morning, Harry. Mysterious light indeed. A light appearing high in the Arctic sky, baffling those who saw it and exciting a lot of comment. Early yesterday morning, just before dawn, this appeared in the Norwegian sky. That's Norwegian for what the heck is that? A blue light, small at first, growing into a spiral and then disappearing into what appeared to be a black hole. In the northern community of Trondelag and on a Norwegian military base, cell phones snapped, video cameras rolled, and bloggers got busy.
A spiral of light moving and then suddenly stopping. There's still a lot of speculation to what it could be.
The Arctic sky is no stranger to atmospheric phenomena. The northern lights and the seasonal flight of Santa, just two. But the explanation here apparently lies across the border with the Russian military and another failed missile launch. A respected Russian daily first reported this morning that the third stage of a sophisticated Bulava intercontinental missile failed. And space experts point to the spiraling of this missile as it failed to launch properly as an explanation for the shape seen over Norway, the halo, they say, produced by missile fuel. The Russian Defense Ministry has just reported that a test launch of a Bulava missile from a submarine in the White Sea failed. It's an embarrassing failure for Russia. Of 12 known tests, at least 7 have been unsuccessful. The Bulava is a high-tech new generation weapon capable of carrying multiple warheads up to 5,000 miles. And with those failures, it may now be on the verge of being scrapped. Harry?
Sheila McVicker live with us in London this morning. Thank you.
Now, as people have pointed out in the comment section of that video, the example they use as a missile spiraling and going out of control looks nothing like the spirals that people have recorded with their phones. You can go to the comment section of this video and see that people are in unity that this is not the truth, that this is not some kind of failed missile launch. And yet today, a lot of people are being duped that these portals, these odd sightings, are SpaceX. Let us also not forget the news that came out when people were browsing Google Earth back in 2014. They noticed these spirals in Egypt. And when this was reported to the news, it came out that this was just an art installation. Nothing to see here. It's just art. What really are these portals? What really are these spirals? Who really knows? But remember, I made a video where I said in 2024, we were hearing and seeing a lot of portal imagery for a reason. And let's not forget that they are creating the most expensive AI, most powerful AI program ever called Stargate, which is a portal. So we're just bombarded with a lot of portal imagery for a reason. Let's also not forget that pink orb that was seen over the pyramids of Giza not too long ago that also turned into a spiral. This video comes from Holy Kella on TikTok.
People in Alexandria, Egypt thought this was the moon in the sky until it started getting larger and changing color. This is near the pyramids of Giza, and it was spotted on Sunday around 6 a.m. and it lasted for a total of 5 minutes. This pink orb grew to be so large that people even in Libya could see it and were taking pictures. Here, look. This is another view of the glowing pink orb in the sky. Number one, what the Number two, why is it near the pyramids of Giza? I have a whole theory on that, but let's keep talking about this orb. And it's not just photos that we have of this glowing pink orb exploding in the sky. The orb eventually turned into a cloud of smoke or vapor, whatever you call this, and the witnesses said that it looked like an explosion with no sound and that it had a solid white light in the middle of it. And after the 5 minutes of it just chilling in the sky, it was gone. Now, this very well could just be one of HAARP's projects in the ionosphere or one of SpaceX's launch leaving residual energy. But if you'll remember correctly, plasma bubbles were spotted over the Pyramid of Giza not too long ago as well. Are they coming back to where they started?
But talking about portals, in this next segment, people are still talking about what was found under the pyramids of Giza. What may lie under the Giza pyramids are massive, bigger than even the tallest buildings of today. And if this is what they believe this is what they look like. They look like massive batteries, as if they're powering something or powered something in ancient Egypt. But did you know back on May 18th, 2024, an article came out where archaeologists found an anomaly under the pyramids or near the pyramids that may reveal an ancient portal. This article is very interesting because this article kind of goes hand in hand with that video I made a few weeks ago where I said when it comes to Stargate, the AI program Stargate, they are not building Stargate, Project Portal. They found something underneath Texas, and its data center is powering whatever they found, or they're harnessing the energy of whatever they found beneath Texas. Using that same logic, is it possible that the pyramids of Giza are an ancient data center meant to either power or harness the energy of a nearby Stargate or portal? So the same method and technologies they use to find these massive structures under the pyramids of Giza, they used back in 2024, a method using GPR along with a method known as electrical resistivity tomography, which uses electrical resistance to map underground structures. And they found this anomaly, which they say is roughly 6.5 feet from the surface and measures 33 feet in length. Well, there we go. There's that number again. But they're saying that this massive anomaly may be a portal. They said whatever this happened to be was also L-shaped, and that was that. That would be the last we would hear of this discovery. And then, like I said, as of 2024, there would be an explosion of portal imagery, portal this, portal that. So I really like the theory a lot that the pyramids are an ancient data center or an energy harvesting area meant to power something nearby that might really be a Stargate. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to
Something massive has just been uncovered beneath the Great Pyramids of Egypt. And a lot of people are talking about this right now. But here's the thing, okay? Nobody, and I mean nobody, not one person that I've seen anyway, has been able to connect the dots and place them in the bigger picture like I'm about to do right now. You see, this discovery is much bigger than anybody can ever imagine. And I found some information that nobody seems to be talking about. So make sure you watch this video all the way to the end and share it with everybody you know. All right, let's cut to it, everybody. Scientists using state-of-the-art radar technology and cosmic ray imaging have just confirmed something absolutely incredible. There's a massive underground city beneath the Pyramid of Giza. And I'm not talking about a small, tiny city. I'm talking about thousands of feet below the surface, almost a mile below the surface, way deeper than archaeologists have ever been able to go. They've found huge, perfectly crafted cylindrical shafts plunging straight down 2,000 to 4,000 feet, depending on the source, into the earth. And spiraling around these giant shafts are passageways, ramps, and they're leading to gigantic cube-shaped chambers. This isn't just symbolic mumbo jumbo, everybody. According to these reports, according to these scientists, this is real, and it's actually concrete proof of an advanced subterranean civilization. Now, mainstream archaeologists, they seem to be panicking, they're discounting this, but not all of them. It is in the news. It's pretty big news right now. The mainstream media and mainstream archaeologists are trying to dismiss these discoveries, hoping that you'll ignore them, trying to just push them under the rug because it doesn't fit with their narrative. But here's the thing, everybody. This isn't the only underground complex that we've found, okay? They're actually all over the world. Every single part of the world has either legends or tales of underground cities, underground chambers, underground tunnels, okay? And we're going to get into some of those today, and we're going to connect the dots to the bigger picture because everything's connected. This isn't just some random thing. This is connected, and frankly, it's bigger than anybody can imagine. So let's backtrack a little bit. You remember Phil Schneider? The same Phil Schneider who gave his testimony about the Dulce deep underground military base. Ultimately, he gave his life for this secret. He exposed this secret, and his life was taken for it. Now, these deep underground military bases in Dulce, New Mexico, as well as other places around the country, he went down in there where he personally encountered these strange beings, tall grays, he called them, deep beneath the earth. About the same distance, mind you, keep that in mind, as these tunnels that were just discovered under the pyramids. And he warned about this decades ago. He warned about these hidden underground cities that have been there for a very, very long time, and governments known about them. And in certain cases, the governments have repurposed them and used them for their own, experiments and stuff like that. And if you do enough research, you'll come to find out that the Dulce base isn't the only underground base, okay? There are many underground bases. They're called deep underground military bases, DUMBs, and they're all over the country. So you might be asking at this point, what does this have to do with these discoveries in Egypt? Is it the same thing? Is it connected in any way? It absolutely is, okay? And we're going to connect these dots, so just bear with me here. Think about it. Why do we find these similar ancient tunnels and subterranean cities all over the planet? Everywhere. Take Peru, for instance. You got the mysterious Chincana. They're tunnels beneath Cusco carved with impossible precision. They are stretching miles and miles under the Andes Mountains. Some accounts even say they go under the Andes, they go all the way to Antarctica and through all of South America, and they're huge, they're massive, big enough for giants to go through, okay? Keep that in mind because this is part of the story we're telling here. Whistleblowers and researchers do confirm there are massive tunnels under Peru. How far do they go? It's hard to say because they've been basically covered up and they were hidden by the Catholic Church when the Catholic Church came in and colonized the area, okay? There was actually churches that were built directly over the entrances to these Chincana and sealed up. Why? I think it's obvious. We know that the early Catholic Church believed in the Nephilim. They believed in the giants. They believed in the fallen angels as reported in Genesis 6. However, something happened within the Catholic Church where they shifted their position. If you read all the early church fathers, they all believed in the Nephilim and the giants and that they were supernatural creatures, all these things. But something happened, they shifted their opinion, and now the official stance of the Catholic Church is that the Nephilim were just people, which doesn't make any sense. They're not just people. That's thoroughly debunked. The text doesn't even say anything that they're just people. The text literally calls them B'nai Ha-Elohim, which is not a term used for people. It's a term used for angels, okay? Because the Bible actually doesn't say that the Nephilim were people. If you go back and you read the Bible in its original Hebrew form, it says the Nephilim were created by the B'nai Ha-Elohim. The B'nai Ha-Elohim are not men. They're not people. They're not godly sons of Seth. Who are they? They are angels. Every single time the term B'nai Ha-Elohim is used in the Old Testament, it is referring to angels. Every single time. So the Catholic Church, they wanted to cover it up saying, oh, that the Nephilim were just people. They are not just people. We're going to get more into that in just a second. So now let's move on to Antarctica. What's hidden beneath the ice in Antarctica? You have Operation High Jump. You have the Nazis that fled from Germany at the end of World War II in their submarines to Antarctica. And, supposedly they went in these underground tunnels under the ice with their submarines and hid from the Americans. And that's why Operation High Jump happened. They were searching for these lost Nazi subs. Brave whistleblowers confirm hidden structures beneath the ice. The global elite have done everything in their power to conceal this. They don't want people to know what's under the ice or under the ground in Antarctica. And then you have Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, where they discovered bizarre objects, tunnels, and strange, mysterious let's just say, signals and waves coming out from underground there. Okay, so there's something underground in Skinwalker Ranch. There's something underground all over that area of Utah and Arizona. These deep underground military bases that were repurposed by the military, by the way, they've been there for thousands of years. They were just discovered and repurposed. They're all connected. Everything's connected here. Specifically at Skinwalker Ranch, whatever's underground there is causing all sorts of paranormal phenomenon, and the government really doesn't want you to know about it. All right, and think about it. Paranormal phenomenon is associated with these underground societies, with these underground tunnels, with these underground structures. Think about Egypt, okay? The whole culture of Egypt revolved around paranormal activity, okay? There's no coincidence in the links between the paranormal activity of whatever's underground there and whatever's happening on the surface. But we'll get into that more in just a minute, because there's a connection between the Great Pyramid of Giza and specific paranormal events linked directly to Aleister Crowley himself, who did a ritual inside the pyramid. And we'll get into that in a second, but it's all connected. Everything we're talking about here is going to be connected to itself, and I'll wrap it up at the end in a nice little ball. Okay, so there's not going to be any stones unturned. We're going to really dig into this one. So every single ancient culture from around the globe, from the Hopi tribes of North America to the Hindus in India, everywhere, all throughout Asia up to Siberia, in Europe, basically every single place in the entire world, they have these stories, these legends, these myths, so-called myths about advanced underground civilizations. You have the legends of Shambhala, you have the legends of Atlantis, which is all connected to this as well. They describe powerful beings, okay, living beneath our feet, ruling these underground cities. Is it a coincidence that every single culture has the same story? No, it's impossible. These aren't myths. These are memories. These are ancient recollections of a global empire, the empire of Atlantis that existed during the days of Noah, before the flood of Noah. This is the empire of the giants and the empire of the fallen angels that the world calls the empire of the gods, but we call it the evil empire that was destroyed by the flood. Okay, so there's two different ways of looking at it. The New Agers and the world themselves, they see this empire of the gods as a positive thing. They look back on it and they want to bring it back, because to them, these gods, which we know as fallen angels, were giving humanity secret knowledge and all this information that they were never meant to have, in exchange for what? Well, in exchange for power, in exchange for the ability to rule over the humans. Okay, this empire of the giants, they were literally being ruled over by fallen angels who were subjugating them under an oppressive rule that basically was so oppressive that God himself had to send the flood to save his creation from these disgusting abominations. Mainstream archaeologists and the History Channel and, basically everybody push this narrative about ancient aliens, building these gigantic structures around the globe. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Baalbek, Göbekli Tepe, all these places all through South America, all the ancient ruins, all the Cyclopean architecture. Here's the thing, guys. It's a distraction, and it's actually inaccurate, because when you look at it through the lens of the Bible, these ancient aliens, they might technically be called aliens by just the term alien being not from Earth. But fallen angels are not from Earth, okay? We know in the Bible that the fallen angels, that all angels, fallen and holy angels, they were there when God created the earth. So by the very definition of an angel, okay, right? They're not human. They're not from Earth. That makes them what? Extraterrestrial, okay? I'm not saying they're space aliens. I'm saying they are angelic beings that appear to be space aliens and that make themselves out to be space aliens. Why? Because they know that if you convince the world that they are space aliens, well, then you can do whatever you want, because people are going to look at space aliens differently than, say, angelic beings that we know are under the authority of Jesus Christ. But here's the thing, everybody. We're just scratching the surface right now, and let's get a little bit deeper right now. So all these ancient ruins, all these Cyclopean architecture, everything that we've been talking about, they weren't built by little green men from another planet. No, they were built by the Nephilim, by the giant hybrids that come straight out of the pages of the Bible. You don't even have to look at the book of Enoch to know that the giants walked the earth. It's in Genesis 6. All right, so let's take it a step further, and we'll connect some dots with Aleister Crowley, okay? Aleister Crowley. He was literally called the most wicked man alive during his day, and for good reason. He called himself the Antichrist 666. And Aleister Crowley didn't just dabble in black magic and the dark arts. No, he performed these sinister rituals in public and he was famous for doing so, and he had a lot of famous people who followed him, okay? And one night, he actually went inside of the Great Pyramid of Giza, inside, into the king's chamber, and did a ritual, deliberately contacting these ancient entities that he openly called demonic. And one of these entities actually appeared to him. He called himself Awas or something like that, who gave Crowley this forbidden knowledge and dictated to him the book of the law. What's contained in it is the secrets straight out of the days of Noah, okay? The days of Noah, this is the Atlantean kingdom. This is the kingdom that was ruled by the fallen angels and the Nephilim. All this information was under the pyramids this whole time, and Crowley knew that, and he went and he contacted them because he wanted to get it out. Aleister Crowley was directly tapping into this empire of the gods, empire of the giants, the fallen angels, and the lost knowledge. All the demonic beings that ruled the earth before Noah's flood that were wiped clean when God cleansed the earth. This is the stuff that Crowley was trying to access, okay? This stuff. And Crowley didn't keep this knowledge to himself. No, he spread it worldwide. He created a global occult movement that was centered around this twisted law. So what did the entity tell him? So the entity told them the new law of the land that's going to overtake the law of the Lord, right? And what is that? It is the do as thou will shall be the whole of the law, okay? That's right, folks. He literally channeled this demonic wisdom straight from the same Nephilim entities who once enslaved humanity before the flood of Noah. And guess who loves Crowley's philosophy today? Can you guess? Well, yeah, you got it right. The Hollywood elites, the politicians, the global elites, mainstream society as a whole. Everybody's embracing this do as thou will mindset. It's bringing our human existence back into the days of Noah ideologically. And most people don't even realize where this do as thou will mindset comes from. It comes from the ancient times, from the days of Atlantis, from the very place that was buried and destroyed with the flood, okay? This do as thou will ideology is literally dragging humanity back to the darkness of the ancient times. And nobody seems to understand why it seems like the world is going the way it is, right? So all those massive stone structures, all these ancient ruins, they're known as Cyclopean architecture, okay? That's just what they're called by scholars worldwide. They're built from stones that are weighing hundreds and thousands of tons. They're found all over Egypt. They're found in South America. They're found underwater in Japan, all over Europe, basically every place in the world. They weren't random. They weren't left by humans, okay? They were created by the Nephilim civilizations that once controlled the world. They're pointing directly back to Atlantis. The Atlantis was actually the capital city of the fallen angels' empire. You think that it's a coincidence that every ancient culture has stories about giants that are teaching humans forbidden knowledge? No, absolutely not. It can't be a coincidence, all right? It's the same global memory from the Atlantean period before the flood. Everything that's been uncovered underground, everything, all of it, okay, worldwide, these underground cities beneath Egypt, the Dulce base, all the other deep underground military bases, Peru, Antarctica, Asia, everywhere in the world, all these secret tunnels and all these underground cities that have been discovered. And the story of Aleister Crowley summoning this spirit in the pyramid, it's all part of the same exact story. And what story is that they've been hiding from us for so long? Well, let's just connect all the dots clearly. Thousands of years ago, in the days of Noah, okay, fallen angels descended from heaven. They took wives, they took human wives, and they made babies with them. They gave birth to giants. These giants are called the Nephilim. This is documented in Genesis 6. It's also documented other places, but you don't need to look outside the Bible to find this. The main thing is, guys, these weren't fairy tales. These were real, powerful, massive beings who corrupted humanity. They spread violence, they spread forbidden knowledge, they gave technology to people. Every single ancient culture on earth tells similar stories of these powerful beings that came from above, and some of them actually came from below, and they were teaching humanity, you know, all these secret sciences and building structures, impossible structures, mind you. And guess what their ancient capital is? Yeah, we talked about it before. It's Atlantis. The empire of Atlantis is the same as the empire of the gods, which is the same as the days of Noah. And we believe that the days of Noah, these weren't gods, okay? These are fallen angels appearing to be gods. Humans, when they see these fallen angels and when they see the Nephilim that were created by the fallen angels, they revered them as God. They worshiped them, and they did whatever they wanted. They even allowed themselves to be corrupted. They allowed themselves to be subjugated and enslaved by them. For what reason? Well, because they wanted the knowledge, they wanted all the superpowers, and they wanted all these crazy things that the fallen angels were giving them. But here's the thing, guys. The Lord God, the Most High, the creator of the universe, He wouldn't tolerate this corruption. And the Bible clearly describes a great flood, a worldwide catastrophe that was specifically sent to wipe out the fallen angels, the Nephilim, and destroy their empire and cleanse the earth from this demonic infestation. Atlantis, all these giant cities, all these underground bases were buried permanently, right? But we'll get into that in a second. All their Cyclopean monuments, all of it was swallowed by the waters. It was destroyed. It was obliterated. But here's where it gets even crazier, because the Bible also says that Nephilim were on the earth before the flood and after the flood. So that means some of them survived. And when you take into account the words of Jesus Christ himself, who said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man, meaning that his second coming will be marked by a return of the days of Noah, a return of this empire of the gods. The earth will be fully transformed like it was back then into a new version of that right before his second coming. And do you think it's any coincidence that we're seeing the inklings of this happening right now? All these new discoveries, all these new ancient buildings, even what Aleister Crowley did, bringing this ancient knowledge into the forefront of human culture, and now having this days of Noah attitude, this mindset of do as thou will, overtaking the world itself, is really, to me, it's pointing that we are getting closer and closer to that time. Now, we're not there yet. I think there has to be a long way to go before we get to the point where we are at the days of Noah, but we're seeing it happening right before our very eyes. And here's where it gets even crazier, guys. Before this destruction, before the flood hit, the Book of Enoch and other ancient sources talk about the pillars of Enoch. Now, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, but in my opinion, the pillars of Enoch could be the Great Pyramids themselves. And what were they meant to do, these pillars of Enoch? Well, according to the text, the pillars of Enoch were built to preserve the ancient knowledge, because the fallen angels, some of them, knew the flood was coming. So what did they want to do? They wanted to preserve their society. They wanted to preserve some of the knowledge in this pillar of Enoch, so that when the flood hits, it will still be there to be accessed, right? And that's exactly what we see. That's what we see under the pyramids right now, right? If this pillars of Enoch was the Great Pyramid, you would expect there to be some sort of ancient knowledge, some sort of ancient mysteries that are buried underneath it, which we're seeing exactly that come to the surface right now. And when you take into account, as we talked about, the Aleister Crowley situation, yes, the pillars of Enoch do seem to be the Great Pyramid. And it does seem that Crowley knew this and was able to access some of this knowledge, right? So do you think it's possible, given all this information, that the pillars of Enoch are the Great Pyramids and what's buried underneath it? And is that exactly what we're being shown right now in this discovery? I think it is, because even after the flood destroyed this demonic empire, some remnants of this empire, it survived underground. You got massive hidden cities, these underground tunnels, these deep underground military bases, and all these different structures that are buried beneath the sands, the ice, the rock, and seemingly under hundreds of thousands of feet of solid rock. It's also why every single culture worldwide remembers the Great Flood. They remember the giants. They remember the underground cities in the underground world. They're calling these real events a global memory of the ancient Atlantean Empire that was wiped clean by God's judgment. And these New Agers, they're desperate to get it back, because they long for the day when they can have this ancient, powerful technology back in their hands. They long for the day when the fallen angels, or what they call the gods of the nations, are back in control of the world. That's what they want. That's what their goal is. And that's what they're aiming for, okay? And this is exactly why the elites, the mainstream, and academia as a whole are covering up and hiding these discoveries, because acknowledging that these facts are true will prove the Bible right, and it will bring people to God. They don't want these secrets exposed. They don't want the connections to Aleister Crowley's satanic rituals and the demonic entities that still guide their actions today exposed. Some of these groups, they worship the same exact dark powers that were around back then. The Nephilim are the demons. When the Nephilim were all killed in the flood, guess what? Their bodies were killed, but their spirits survived. And these are the demons of the world. And that's why these occultists do these rituals to contact the demon, because they're worshiping the Nephilim. They view these demons as positive because they see them as the Nephilim overlords of the ancient times, and they want to get that knowledge back. That's exactly the reason why people worship demons. It's all connected, everything. They want to push humanity back toward a new Atlantis, the new global empire of the gods. They want darkness to take over the land once again, okay? So it's easy to see how all this stuff is connected. These events aren't separate. They're all connected. It's one giant story, and the story isn't done yet. We still have some time to go, but if you can recognize what's happening and connect the dots with everything else and see the big picture that's taking place right under our very noses, well, you're going to be better off than most people. So I want to know what you think about this. Please.
Kofi, follow me.